The hotel clerk's words hung in the air like a death sentence. One room left, one bed. Ethan Cole stared at his boss, the woman who held his daughter's future in her hands, and felt the ground shift beneath his feet. Victoria Hayes met his eyes with the same trapped expression he knew was on his face. Outside, the storm that had grounded every flight out of Denver screamed against the windows. Inside, a different kind of storm was about to begin. This wasn't just about a bed. It was about a line he couldn't cross, a promotion he couldn't lose, and a choice that would change everything. If you want to see how Ethan navigates this impossible night, stay with me until the end. And please hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The presentation had gone perfectly. Ethan Cole stood at the back of the conference room, watching Victoria Hayes field questions from the board with the precision of a surgeon and the confidence of a general. 20 minutes earlier, he'd delivered the financial projections that would secure the merger, projections he'd spent 3 months perfecting while his daughter, Sophie, did homework at the kitchen table and asked why Daddy always looked so tired. This was it. The moment that would justify all those late nights, all those missed bedtime stories he'd made up for later, all those times he'd chosen spreadsheets over sleep. Regional Director. The promotion Victoria had dangled in front of him like a lifeline for 6 months. Enough money to move Sophie out of their cramped apartment. Enough security to stop checking his bank account before buying groceries. Enough stability to finally exhale. Exceptional work, Mr. Cole. Victoria's voice cut through his thoughts. The board members were standing, gathering their materials, and she was looking directly at him with something that might have been approval in her steel gray eyes. Walk with me. In the elevator, she didn't speak until the doors closed. You carried that room. Thank you. Ethan kept his voice professional, his posture appropriate. 6 years at Harrison and Locke had taught him exactly how much space to maintain between himself and the senior vice president of operations. 18 inches, professional distance, safe distance. The board was impressed. I was impressed. She adjusted her briefcase, and Ethan noticed the slight tremor in her hands before she steadied them. Victoria Hayes never trembled. This puts you exactly where we discussed. Regional Director. She didn't have to say it. The promotion hung between them like a promise finally within reach. I appreciate the opportunity, Ethan said carefully. Sophie's been asking about the new school district. Something flickered across Victoria's face. Surprise, maybe, that he'd mentioned his daughter, that he'd reminded her he was human, not just an asset to be deployed, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced by her usual mask of controlled authority. You've earned it, she said as the elevator doors opened. Now let's get home before this storm grounds us. The storm. Ethan had been tracking it all day between presentation rehearsals. A freak spring blizzard barreling across the Rockies, already causing delays. Their flight was at 6. It was 3:30 now, plenty of time, except there wasn't. The announcement came while they were in the taxi to the airport. All flights canceled until morning. No exceptions. The driver, a weathered man with kind eyes, shook his head. Been driving in Denver 20 years. Never seen one roll in this fast. You folks have a place to stay? Ethan pulled out his phone, already searching hotels. Victoria was doing the same, her fingers moving across her screen with increasing urgency. He watched her professional composure begin to crack around the edges as she made call after call. Full, she said after the 5th attempt. Everything's full. The driver caught Ethan's eye in the rearview mirror. Broncos game tomorrow, big convention at the center, and now this storm. I'd try the Meridian on 16th. They sometimes hold back a few rooms. The Meridian. Ethan knew it by reputation, the kind of place where a single night cost what he usually spent on groceries for a month. But Victoria was already redirecting the driver, her jaw set in that expression he'd learned meant non-negotiable. The lobby was chaos. Stranded travelers crowded every surface, their voices rising in collective desperation. Children cried. A businessman shouted into his phone. Somewhere, a woman was explaining to the desk clerk that she absolutely had to get to her sister's wedding. Victoria cut through the crowd like a ship through water, and Ethan followed in her wake, feeling acutely aware of the difference between them. She belonged here, in this marble and crystal lobby where the chandelier probably cost more than his car. He was just the guy from accounting who'd gotten lucky with numbers and unlucky with love. We need 2 rooms, Victoria told the clerk, a young woman whose name tag read Amanda, and whose eyes held the exhausted patience of someone who'd been delivering bad news for hours. Amanda's fingers flew across the keyboard, clicked, frowned, clicked again. I'm so sorry, we have 1 room available. 1 room? Victoria's voice carried the weight of someone used to getting what she wanted. That's not acceptable. Ma'am, with respect, you're lucky we have that. The system shows it's our last available accommodation. Amanda's professional smile never wavered, but Ethan could see the steel underneath. She'd been doing this all day. If you'd like, I can call our sister property across town, which is also fully booked, Victoria finished. I've already called them. Ethan stepped forward, catching Amanda's eye. What kind of room? Something in his tone, the lack of entitlement maybe, or just exhaustion that mirrored her own, made Amanda's expression soften slightly. Executive King. 1 bed. It's actually our nicest suite, which is why it was being held for VIPs, but under the circumstances... She let the sentence trail off, the implication clear. Take it or sleep in the airport. 1 bed. The words dropped into the space between Ethan and Victoria like a stone into still water. He watched the ripples spread across her face. Shock, calculation, discomfort, and something else he couldn't quite name. We'll take it, Victoria said before Ethan could speak. Her voice was steady, decisive, but he noticed she didn't look at him. We're professionals. We can manage 1 night. Amanda processed their information with the swift efficiency of someone who wanted this transaction over with. 2 key cards materialized. 9th floor, room 914. Breakfast is from 6 to 10, and we'll update you on flight statuses as we receive them. In the elevator, a different moment, but somehow the same suspended silence, Ethan finally found his voice. We could find somewhere else. I could sleep in the lobby. Don't be ridiculous, Victoria's eyes were fixed on the ascending numbers. We're both adults. We can share a room for 1 night without making it complicated. But it was already complicated. Ethan thought of Sophie, safe at his mother's house, probably curled up with her favorite book and wondering why Daddy's trip was taking so long. He thought of the promotion, of the future that was finally within reach. He thought of the 18 inches of professional distance that was about to vanish entirely. The suite was beautiful. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Denver disappearing into white, a sitting area with a couch and desk, a bathroom larger than Sophie's bedroom, and there, dominating the space like an elephant no one wanted to acknowledge, a king-size bed with pristine white linens and too many pillows. 1 bed. Victoria set her briefcase down with careful precision. I'll take the couch. No. Ethan surprised himself with the firmness in his voice. You're the senior executive. I'll take the couch. Mr. Cole? Ethan. The informality felt strange in his mouth. 6 years of Mr. Cole and Ms. Hayes, 6 years of carefully maintained hierarchy, and now here they were, about to spend the night 15 feet apart. If we're sharing a room, you should probably call me Ethan. She looked at him then, really looked at him, and for the first time since he'd started at Harrison and Locke, Ethan saw past the armor. Victoria Hayes was tired. Not just end-of-the-day tired, but bone-deep, soul-weary, exhausted. The kind of tired that came from holding yourself together through sheer force of will. Victoria, she said quietly, and you're not sleeping on the couch. We'll work something out. They stood there in the beautiful suite, the storm raging outside, and Ethan felt the ground shift again. This wasn't about the bed anymore. It was about the fact that Victoria Hayes, the woman who never showed weakness, never faltered, never let anyone see behind the mask, was looking at him like he was a person instead of an employee, like she was a person too. I should call my daughter, Ethan said, needing to break the moment before it became something else. Let her know I'm okay. Of course. Victoria turned away, creating distance where there was none. I'll order dinner. Any preferences? Whatever's fine. Ethan retreated to the windows, pulling out his phone, putting space between them even as the room felt smaller by the second. Sophie answered on the second ring. Daddy! The sound of her voice, bright, uncomplicated, pure, cut through everything. This was why he was here. This was why the promotion mattered. This was why he wouldn't let anything compromise the future he was building for her. "Hey, sweetheart, how's Grandma's?" "Good. We made cookies, and I finished my book report, and Grandma says I can stay up late because it's a special trip. Are you coming home tomorrow?" "That's the plan. There's a big storm here, so my flight got canceled, but I'll be home as soon as I can." He kept his voice light, easy, normal. "What book did you report on?" As Sophie launched into an enthusiastic summary of her report on Charlotte's Web, Ethan watched Victoria in the reflection of the window. She'd moved to the desk, her phone pressed to her ear, but her shoulders had lost their rigid set. She looked smaller somehow, more human. When she ended her call, she just stood there for a moment, staring at nothing. "I love you, Soph," Ethan said softly. "Be good for Grandma." "I love you too, Daddy. Bring me something from Denver." He smiled despite everything. "We'll see. Sweet dreams." When he turned around, Victoria was watching him with an expression he'd never seen before. Not the calculating executive measuring his worth, not the demanding boss expecting perfection, something softer, something almost wistful. "How old is she?" Victoria asked. 7. Just turned 7 last month. Ethan pocketed his phone, suddenly self-conscious. They'd worked together for 6 years, and she'd never asked about Sophie, not once. She wanted a birthday party at the Science Museum. Did she get it? Yeah. The memory made him smile. 14 kids screaming about dinosaurs and touching everything they weren't supposed to touch. It was chaos. It was perfect. Victoria's expression did something complicated. "That sounds nice." The word hung awkwardly between them, and Ethan realized with sudden clarity that Victoria Hayes had no idea what a child's birthday party looked like. Not from experience, anyway. Not from memory. "I ordered room service," Victoria said, her voice carefully controlled again. "Soup and sandwiches. I hope that's acceptable." "More than acceptable. Thank you." Ethan loosened his tie, then stopped, suddenly aware that loosening his tie meant getting comfortable, which meant acknowledging they were staying here, together, for the night. Do you mind if I take a quick shower? It's been a long day." "Of course. I'll do the same after dinner arrives." The bathroom was a relief, a door he could close, a space that was temporarily his alone. Ethan stood under the hot water and tried to sort through the tangled mess of this situation. He was sharing a room with his boss. The woman who controlled his career, his future, his daughter's security. The woman he'd watched from a careful distance for 6 years, admiring her competence while never, ever letting himself see her as anything other than exactly what she was, off limits. Except now she'd asked about Sophie. Now she'd looked at him like he was real. When he emerged, dressed in the spare shirt and slacks he always packed, a habit from Sophie's early years, when spit up and spilled juice meant constant wardrobe changes, dinner had arrived. Victoria had changed too, though she'd clearly had to make do with what she had. Her suit jacket was gone, her blouse slightly rumpled, her hair freed from its usual severe twist. She looked younger, more uncertain, more human. They ate in cautious silence, maintaining their invisible boundaries. Victoria sat in the desk chair, Ethan on the edge of the bed. The couch remained between them, neutral territory. Outside, the storm intensified, wind howling against the windows with a sound like grief. "The presentation really was excellent," Victoria said finally. "Your projections were more thorough than anything our team has produced in years." "I had a good teacher." Ethan met her eyes. "You've pushed me harder than anyone else at the company." "You needed pushing. You have more potential than you realize." She set down her half-eaten sandwich. "Most people coast. You kept climbing." "I have a reason to climb." Ethan thought of Sophie, of the future he was building one spreadsheet at a time. "I can't afford to coast." Victoria studied him with that new expression, the one that saw past the employee to the person underneath. "Your daughter's mother, if you don't mind me asking, cancer." The word came easier now than it had 3 years ago, but it still hurt. Sophie was 4. It was fast. "I'm sorry." The words were simple, but something in Victoria's voice made them real. Not the automatic condolence of an uncomfortable colleague, but genuine grief for a loss she somehow understood. That must have been impossible. Some days it still is. Ethan surprised himself with the honesty. Maybe it was the storm, or the strangeness of the situation, or the fact that Victoria was looking at him like his pain mattered. Sophie looks like her. Same smile. Sometimes I'll turn around and see her laughing, and for just a second I forget. Victoria's expression cracked completely. You're doing it alone. It wasn't a question, but Ethan answered anyway. My mother helps. She's been a lifesaver, but yeah, mostly alone. That's... Victoria stopped, started again. That's remarkable. Your work never showed it. You never asked for accommodations, never used it as an excuse, because I couldn't afford to. The truth came out sharper than Ethan intended. Single fathers don't get the benefit of the doubt in corporate America. We get judged twice as hard and trusted half as much. I couldn't be good. I had to be perfect. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was the silence of recognition, of something unspoken finally given voice. Victoria stood, moved to the window, and Ethan could see her reflection in the glass. A woman in a hotel room, staring at a storm, carrying weight she'd never shown. I was supposed to have children, she said quietly. That was the plan. Meet someone, build a life, have a family, normal things, human things. Her laugh was bitter. Instead, I built a career. I chose ambition over everything else. And now I'm 42 years old, standing in a hotel room, and I can't remember the last time someone asked how I was doing. Ethan stood too, moving closer, but not too close. How are you doing? Victoria turned, and the look on her face nearly broke him. I don't know. I've been asking myself that for years, and I honestly don't know anymore. The confession hung between them, dangerous and raw. This was his boss. This was Victoria Hayes, senior vice president, the woman who'd made grown men cry in quarterly reviews. But right now, she was just Victoria, a woman who'd climbed so high she'd forgotten why she was climbing. The promotion, Ethan said carefully. You mentioned it was part of a larger restructure. They're moving me to New York, global operations. Victoria's voice was hollow. It's everything I've worked for. Corner office, executive leadership team, everything. But I'll be managing 3 continents, reporting to the CEO, working 70-hour weeks minimum. There won't be time for anything else. There's barely time now. She met his eyes. I'm 42. This is my last chance to choose differently. And I don't even know what differently would look like. Ethan understood then. The tremor in her hands before the presentation. The wistfulness when he talked about Sophie's birthday. The exhaustion that went deeper than one late night. Victoria Hayes had climbed to the top and found nothing there but more climbing. You could say no, he said softly. To a promotion people would kill for? Victoria shook her head. That's not how it works. You don't say no to opportunities like this. You could. Ethan thought of all the times he'd said no. To overtime, that would mean missing Sophie's school play. To travel, that would mean leaving her with his mother too many nights in a row. To opportunities that would advance his career but cost him his daughter's childhood. If the price is too high, you can walk away. Can you? The question was sharp, pointed. You're about to be regional director. That comes with expectations, demands, long hours, extensive travel. Can you do that and still be there for your daughter? The question hit like a punch. Because Victoria was right. The promotion he'd been chasing would change everything. More money, yes. Security, yes. But also more time away from Sophie, more nights on the road, more mornings missing breakfast to catch early flights. I don't know, Ethan admitted. I've been so focused on getting the promotion that I haven't thought about what comes after. That's the trap. Victoria's smile was sad. We think the next step will be different. The next title, the next salary increase, the next achievement. We think that's when we'll finally have enough, when we'll finally be able to breathe. She turned back to the window. But there's always another step, always another mountain to climb. And one day you wake up and realize you've climbed so far you can't even see the ground anymore. Outside, the storm reached a crescendo. Lightning split the sky, thunder shaking the windows. And inside, in the careful silence of room 914, 2 people stood on opposite sides of a divide they'd maintained for 6 years and Ethan felt it beginning to crack. "Why did you take this job?" he asked. "At Harrison and Locke, why this company?" Victoria considered the question like it was a puzzle she'd never bothered to solve. "Because they offered it. Because it was a step up from where I was. Because that's what you do. You take the next opportunity, and the next, and the next." She paused. "I don't think I ever asked myself if it was what I wanted." "What do you want?" The question should have been too personal, too intimate for a boss and employee. But the night had already crossed so many lines that one more didn't seem to matter. And Victoria didn't deflect. She just looked at him with those steel-gray eyes that were for once completely unguarded. "I want to wake up in the morning and not immediately start calculating what I have to accomplish before I can sleep again. I want to have a conversation that isn't about quarterly targets or market projections. I want—" She stopped, started again. "I want to matter to someone. Not as an executive or a boss or a strategic asset, just as myself." Ethan's chest tightened. He knew that loneliness, had lived it for 3 years since Claire died, filling the silence with Sophie's laughter and school projects and bedtime stories. But Sophie wouldn't be 7 forever. She'd grow up, grow independent, and then what? Would he end up like Victoria, successful and lonely, wondering where all the years had gone? "You matter to your team," he said, though it sounded hollow even to his own ears. "No, I don't." Victoria's honesty was brutal. "They respect me. Maybe they fear me, but I'm not a person to them. I'm an obstacle to navigate or a ladder to climb. When I walk into a room, people adjust their expressions. They measure their words. They perform." "Is that what I do?" The question surprised them both. Victoria studied him for a long moment, and Ethan felt the weight of her assessment like a physical thing. "No," she said finally. "You don't perform. You maintain distance, but it's different. You see me. Most people look at my title. You look at—" She gestured vaguely. "Whatever's behind it." "A person," Ethan said quietly. "I see a person." The words settled between them like a confession, because it was true. Somewhere in 6 years of presentations and quarterly reviews and carefully maintained professional boundaries, Ethan had started seeing Victoria Hayes as more than just his boss. He'd noticed the way she rubbed her temples before difficult meetings, the way she took her coffee, black, no sugar, but she always added cream when she thought no one was watching, the way her mask slipped for just a moment when someone on the team announced they were pregnant or getting married before she locked it back into place. He'd noticed, and he'd made himself stop noticing, because noticing was dangerous. "I should prepare for bed," Victoria said abruptly, the intimacy of the moment breaking like glass. "It's been a long day." She disappeared into the bathroom, and Ethan stood alone in the suite, listening to the storm and wondering what the hell was happening. This was supposed to be simple. Get the promotion. Secure Sophie's future. Don't complicate things. But nothing about tonight was simple. When Victoria emerged, she'd changed into, Ethan blinked, a hotel robe and her blouse, her suit carefully hung in the closet. She'd washed her face, and without makeup she looked even younger, vulnerable. "I didn't pack for an overnight stay," she said, defensive. "This was the best I could do." "It's fine," Ethan gestured to the couch. "I'll make up the couch." "Ethan," Victoria's voice was firm. "We're both adults. The bed is large enough for 2 people to sleep without even touching. We'll put pillows between us if you want to build a fortress, but you're not sleeping on the couch." He wanted to argue. Every professional instinct screamed that sharing a bed with his boss was a catastrophically bad idea. But Victoria was already pulling back the covers, arranging pillows down the center of the mattress with military precision, creating a barrier that was somehow both protective and absurd. "There," she said, climbing onto one side. "See? Perfectly appropriate. You stay on your side, I'll stay on mine, and in the morning we'll catch our flights and forget this ever happened." Except Ethan knew they wouldn't forget. This night was already burned into his memory. The storm, the confessions, the way Victoria looked without her armor. But he was too tired to argue, too overwhelmed to think of alternatives. So he turned off the lights, leaving only the glow from the windows, and climbed onto his side of the bed. The pillow barrier was laughable, a symbolic gesture that did nothing to change the fact that Victoria Hayes was less than 2 feet away, her breathing soft in the darkness. Ethan stared at the ceiling and tried to think about anything else. Sophie's book report, quarterly projections, the maintenance schedule for his car. Anything. Ethan? Victoria's voice was quiet, almost hesitant. Yeah? Thank you. For earlier. For asking how I was doing. A pause. No one's asked me that in longer than I can remember. Ethan turned his head, could just make out her silhouette in the dim light. You're welcome. Your daughter is lucky to have you. The words hit harder than they should have. I'm lucky to have her. Silence fell again, but it was different now. Not uncomfortable, just present. Two people in a room, a storm outside, and all the carefully constructed walls between them starting to crumble. Can I ask you something? Victoria said. Sure. Do you resent it? Raising her alone? Missing opportunities because you have to be home for bedtime? Being judged for being a single parent? Ethan thought about it, really thought about it. Sometimes, he admitted, when I'm at work and I get a call from the school nurse and I see my colleagues look at each other like, here we go again. When I have to leave a meeting early for a parent-teacher conference and someone makes a comment about commitment. When I watch other people get promoted because they can work weekends and I can't, he paused. But then Sophie does something, draws me a picture, or tells me about her day, or falls asleep holding my hand, and I remember that none of the rest of it matters. That's beautiful. Victoria's voice was thick. That's what it's supposed to be like, isn't it? Having someone who matters more than work. You could still have that. I don't know how. The confession was raw. I don't know how to be anything other than what I am. Ethan rolled onto his side, facing the pillow barrier between them. Maybe you start by asking yourself what you want, not what you're supposed to want, not what makes sense for your career, just what would make you happy. I don't remember how to be happy. The words broke something in Ethan's chest. Because he understood. He'd felt that way in the months after Claire died, when everything was Sophie and survival and making it through one more day. Happiness had seemed like a luxury he couldn't afford, a frivolous distraction from the serious business of keeping his daughter alive and fed and loved. But somewhere along the way, Sophie had taught him how to be happy again. Small moments, stupid jokes, pancakes on Saturday mornings, the way she said, "I love you, Daddy," like it was the most important thing in the world. Happiness isn't something you achieve, Ethan said quietly. It's not a promotion or a title or a salary. It's moments, small things. The people who see you and love you anyway. Is that from a fortune cookie? But Victoria's tone was gentle, almost teasing. Sophie's favorite movie. She made me watch it 17 times. Ethan smiled in the darkness. But yeah, I think it's true. They fell silent again, and Ethan felt himself starting to drift. The storm was quieting, the thunder more distant. Tomorrow they'd go back to being boss and employee. Tomorrow the walls would go back up. But tonight, for just a few more hours, they were just two people trying to figure out how they'd ended up here. Ethan? He was half asleep, his response barely a murmur. I'm glad you're on my team. Ethan smiled. Me too. Somewhere in the night, the pillow barrier shifted. Neither of them moved it deliberately, but sleep and unconscious proximity did what consciousness wouldn't allow. When Ethan woke around 3 a.m., disoriented and thirsty, he realized with a start that Victoria was curled on her side facing him, one hand stretched across the space between them. Not touching, but close. So close. He should move, should reinforce the boundary, should remember that this woman controlled his career and his future. But she looked peaceful for the first time since he'd met her. The harsh lines of stress were smoothed away, her breathing deep and even. She looked like someone who'd finally been allowed to rest. Ethan stayed still, watching the shadows on the ceiling, listening to the last whispers of the storm, and wondering what the morning would bring. Because something had changed tonight, something neither of them could take back or pretend hadn't happened. They'd seen each other, really seen each other. And in the morning, they'd have to figure out what that meant. Outside, the first hints of dawn began to lighten the sky. The storm had passed. But inside room 914, another storm was just beginning, one that neither professional distance nor carefully maintained boundaries would be able to contain forever. Ethan closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but he knew deep in his bones, in the part of him that had learned to trust his instincts, that nothing would be the same after tonight. Nothing at all. Dawn broke over Denver in shades of pink and gold, the storm's violence replaced by an almost aggressive serenity. Ethan woke to unfamiliar light and the disorienting awareness that he wasn't alone. For one confused moment, he thought he was home, that Claire was beside him, that the last 3 years had been nothing but a terrible dream. Then he remembered. The hotel. The storm. Victoria. She was still asleep, her face turned toward him across the demolished pillow barrier. Sometime in the night, they'd both shifted, and now there was barely a foot between them. Close enough that he could see the faint lines around her eyes, the silver threading through her dark hair at the temples. Close enough to notice she looked younger in sleep, the weight of command stripped away. Ethan slipped out of bed as carefully as possible, padding to the window in his wrinkled shirt and slacks. The city below was blanketed in white, streets empty, the world holding its breath in that quiet space between storm and recovery. His phone showed 6:15. Flights wouldn't resume until at least 9, maybe later. More time. More hours in this room with the woman who'd shown him her humanity and couldn't take it back. "What time is it?" Victoria's voice was rough with sleep, unguarded. "Early." Ethan didn't turn around. "Sorry if I woke you." "You didn't." He heard her sit up, the rustle of sheets. "I never sleep well in hotels." "But you slept last night." The observation hung between them. Victoria didn't respond, and when Ethan finally turned, she was staring at her hands like they belonged to someone else. "Coffee," she said abruptly. "I need coffee." The room service breakfast arrived with efficient hotel precision, wheeled in by a cheerful server who seemed utterly unbothered by the fact that 2 business professionals were clearly wearing yesterday's clothes in a shared room. Ethan wondered what stories this kid had seen, what assumptions he'd made and dismissed in the course of his shifts. They ate in careful silence, Victoria behind her phone checking flight statuses, Ethan responding to texts from his mother about Sophie's morning routine. The intimacy of the night felt like something that had happened to different people, in a different lifetime. The walls were going back up, brick by brick. "Earliest flight is 11:30, Victoria said, setting down her phone with controlled precision. "That gives us 5 hours." 5 hours. Ethan did the math. Checkout wasn't until noon. They couldn't go anywhere in this snow, and sitting in this room pretending last night hadn't happened seemed like an exercise in futility. "We could work," he suggested. "Review the merger documents. Prepare for next week's follow-up." Victoria looked at him over her coffee cup, and something in her expression made Ethan's stomach tighten. "Do you want to work?" The question was simple, but the weight behind it was anything but. Did he want to retreat into spreadsheets and projections, rebuild the professional distance that had kept them safe for 6 years? Or did he want to stay in this strange, suspended reality where Victoria Hayes asked about his daughter and admitted she didn't know how to be happy? "No," Ethan said honestly. "Not really." Victoria set down her cup. "Neither do I." The admission felt dangerous. They were in a hotel room, alone, and Victoria was looking at him with an openness that made his pulse quicken in ways it absolutely shouldn't. This was his boss. This was the woman who controlled his future. This was every HR violation waiting to happen. But she'd asked how he was doing, and no one ever asked him that. "Tell me about your daughter," Victoria said, and Ethan heard the real question underneath. "Tell me about the life I never chose. Show me what I missed." So he did. He told her about Sophie's obsession with dinosaurs, how she'd announced at age 5 that she wanted to be a paleontologist and had never wavered. He told her about the time Sophie had tried to dig up the backyard looking for fossils and had instead unearthed the sprinkler system, flooding the garden and creating what she'd proudly called a prehistoric swamp. He told her about parent-teacher conferences where Sophie's teachers used words like precocious and spirited and sometimes, with gentle concern, challenging. "She sounds exhausting," Victoria said, but she was smiling. "She is." Ethan's chest ached with love and absence in equal measure. "She's the best thing I've ever done, the only thing I've done that actually matters. The merger matters. Your work matters." "Does it?" Ethan surprised himself with the question. "In 20 years, will anyone remember the Harrison-Locke merger? Will it change anyone's life? Will it make the world better?" Victoria was quiet for a long moment. You're having a crisis of purpose. Maybe. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. Or maybe I'm just tired of pretending that quarterly earnings and market share are more important than being there when my daughter learns to ride a bike. You can't ride bikes with her if you can't afford to feed her. I know. The frustration in his voice surprised them both. That's the trap, isn't it? I need the job to take care of Sophie, but the job takes me away from Sophie, and somewhere in the middle, I'm supposed to figure out how to be enough for everyone. Victoria stood, moved to the window, and Ethan watched her reflection in the glass. I never had anyone depending on me, she said quietly. No children, no partner, just myself and my career. It should have been simpler, but somehow it's just as complicated. Because you're human, Ethan said. You need more than work and achievement. Do I? Victoria turned, and the vulnerability in her face was almost painful to witness. I've structured my entire life around not needing anything else. I convinced myself that was strength. Independence. But last night, when you asked what I wanted, she stopped, started again. I realized I don't know. I've forgotten how to want things that aren't on a strategic plan. Ethan stood too, crossing the space between them without thinking. So remember. How? Start small. What did you want when you were younger? Before the career, before the titles? What made you happy? Victoria's laugh was bitter. I wanted to be a teacher, high school English. I wanted to help kids fall in love with books the way I had. She shook her head. God, I haven't thought about that in decades. Why didn't you? Because it didn't pay enough, because my parents said it was a waste of my education, because everyone told me I was too smart, too capable, too ambitious to settle for a teacher's salary. Victoria's eyes were bright. So I went to business school. I climbed the ladder. I became exactly what everyone said I should be. And I never asked myself if it was what I wanted to be. Ethan's chest tightened. It's not too late. Isn't it? I'm 42 years old. I have a mortgage and car payments and a retirement account that depends on my salary. I can't just quit and become a teacher. Why not? The question seemed to genuinely shock her. Because that's not how life works. You don't throw away 20 years of building a career for some childhood dream. People do it all the time. Ethan thought of his own pivots, the choices he'd made after Claire died. My wife wanted to be a doctor. She was pre-med when we met. But then she got pregnant with Sophie, and medical school didn't make sense anymore, so she became a nurse instead. She used to say it was a compromise, but I saw her with patience. She was incredible. She found meaning in the work she could do, not the work she'd planned to do. She sounds remarkable. She was. The past tense still hurt. But she'd be the first person to tell you that life is too short to spend it being miserable, even if being miserable comes with a corner office. Victoria's expression cracked. I'm not miserable. Aren't you? The words hung between them, a challenge and an invitation. Victoria opened her mouth to argue, then closed it. Her shoulders sagged. I don't know anymore, she whispered. I've been running so hard for so long that I don't know how to stop, and I'm terrified that if I do stop, I'll realize I've been running in the wrong direction all along. Ethan wanted to touch her, to offer comfort the way he would with Sophie when she was scared. But this wasn't his daughter, and comfort would mean crossing lines they couldn't uncross. So he just stood there, close enough that she could reach for him if she wanted, far enough to maintain the illusion of professional distance. You asked me last night if I resented raising Sophie alone, Ethan said quietly. The answer is complicated. Because, yes, sometimes I resent missing opportunities. Sometimes I'm angry at Claire for dying, which is irrational and awful, but true. Sometimes I look at my colleagues who can work late and travel freely, and I'm jealous of their freedom. He paused. But then I remember that Sophie won't be 7 forever. She'll grow up, and one day I'll wish I could go back to bedtime stories and scraped knees and terrible knock-knock jokes. I'll wish I had more time, not less. So you're saying I should have had children? Victoria's voice was tight. No. I'm saying you should figure out what you actually want, not what you're supposed to want. Maybe that's children. Maybe it's teaching. Maybe it's something else entirely. Ethan met her eyes. But you'll never know if you keep running. Victoria stared at him for a long moment, and Ethan saw the war happening behind her eyes. The executive who'd built an empire of control battling with the woman who'd admitted she didn't know how to be happy. The boss who maintained distance fighting with the person who'd slept peacefully for the first time in years. "I don't know how to stop running," she said finally. "You just stop." "Just like that?" "Just like that?" Victoria's laugh was shaky. "You make it sound simple." "It's not simple. It's terrifying. But it's also the only way forward." Ethan thought about the night Claire died, the decision he'd made to keep living for Sophie even when he wanted to stop. You choose. Every day you choose what matters, and eventually those choices become your life. And you chose your daughter. "I chose my daughter," Ethan confirmed, even when it meant losing opportunities, even when it meant being judged, even when it meant being alone. "Are you lonely?" The question was soft, almost tentative. Ethan could have lied, could have said he was fine, that Sophie was enough, that he didn't sometimes lie awake at night and ache for adult conversation and physical intimacy and someone who saw him as more than just Sophie's dad. But Victoria had been honest with him, had shown him her cracks and vulnerabilities. She deserved the same. "Yes," he said. "Sometimes I'm so lonely I can barely breathe." Victoria's eyes glistened. "Me too." The confession settled between them like a third presence in the room. Two lonely people who'd built walls for protection and found themselves imprisoned instead. The distance between them felt suddenly unbearable, a gap that needed closing. Ethan took a step back. "I should check on flight statuses," he said, his voice rough. "Make sure we don't miss our window." He saw the hurt flash across Victoria's face before she locked it away. "Of course, that's sensible." But nothing about this was sensible. They were standing in a hotel room having the most honest conversation of Ethan's life with a woman who could fire him with a word. They were blurring lines that should never blur, building intimacy in a space where only professional distance should exist. And part of Ethan, a part he didn't want to examine too closely, didn't want to stop. His phone rang, shattering the moment. His mother's name flashed on the screen. "I should take this," Ethan said apologetically. "Of course." Victoria retreated to the bathroom, giving him privacy he hadn't asked for but desperately needed. "Hey, Mom." "Ethan, how's Denver? Sophie's asking when you're coming home." "Flights are running again. I should be back this afternoon." Ethan moved to the window, needing distance from the bed, from the ghost of last night's confessions. "How is she?" "She's wonderful. We're making pancakes. She wants to tell you about the constellation she found in her astronomy app." His mother's voice softened. "You sound tired, honey. Are you okay?" The question, so simple, so familiar, nearly undid him. "Yeah, Mom, I'm fine." "You're a terrible liar. You always have been." A pause. "What happened?" Ethan closed his eyes. "Nothing happened. The storm grounded us. I got a hotel room. I'll be home soon." A hotel room, singular. "Mom, I'm not judging, sweetheart. I'm just saying that you've been alone for 3 years. If something or someone is making you happy." "It's not like that." Ethan kept his voice low, aware that Victoria could probably hear through the bathroom door. "It's complicated. Life is complicated. Happiness doesn't have to be." "She's my boss, Mom. The person who controls my promotion, my career, everything I've been working toward." The silence on the other end was heavy with understanding. "Oh, Ethan." "Nothing happened," he said again more firmly. "Nothing is going to happen. We're professionals." "Being professional and being human aren't mutually exclusive," his mother sighed. "Just be careful with your heart and with Sophie's future. Sometimes those things are the same, and sometimes they're not." After he hung up, Ethan stood at the window and tried to organize his thoughts into something resembling rationality. He was attracted to Victoria. There. He could admit it, not just physically, though she was beautiful in a severe, controlled way that was somehow more compelling than conventional prettiness, but intellectually, emotionally. She challenged him. She saw him. And last night, when she'd admitted her loneliness, he'd felt a pull toward her that had nothing to do with professionalism and everything to do with recognition. But his mother was right. His heart and Sophie's future weren't always aligned. Getting involved with Victoria, even if she wanted that, which was a massive assumption, could jeopardize everything. The promotion, his job, the stability he'd fought so hard to build. Unless it didn't. Unless Victoria meant what she'd implied about the New York position, about choosing differently. Unless this strange night had changed something for both of them. The bathroom door opened. Victoria emerged, her mask firmly back in place. She'd smoothed her hair, straightened her clothes, rebuilt the armor. She looked like the senior vice president of operations again, not the vulnerable woman who'd confessed she didn't know how to be happy. "The airline confirms 11:30 departure," she said briskly. "We should prepare to leave for the airport by 10. "Okay." Ethan matched her professional tone, following her lead. "I'll pack up." They moved around each other with careful choreography, maintaining distance, avoiding eye contact. The intimacy of the morning was shoved back into whatever box it had escaped from, sealed tight. By the time they were ready to leave, they could have been any two colleagues sharing a ride to the airport. Except Ethan kept thinking about the way she'd looked at him when she said, "Me too." The way her vulnerability had called to his own loneliness like a siren song. The taxi ride was silent. The airport was chaos, thousands of stranded travelers trying to rebook, children crying, tempers fraying. Victoria navigated it with her usual efficiency, and Ethan let her take the lead, falling back into familiar patterns. Boss and employee, superior and subordinate, safe roles they both knew how to play. But at the gate, waiting to board, Victoria's phone rang. Ethan watched her face change as she listened. Surprise, then calculation, then something that looked almost like fear. "I understand," she said into the phone. "Yes, I'll need a few days to consider. Thank you." She ended the call and stood there, staring at her phone like it had just delivered news of a death. "Victoria." Ethan forgot to call her Ms. Hayes. "What's wrong?" "That was the CEO." Her voice was flat. "The New York position. They want me to start in 2 weeks." 2 weeks? Ethan's stomach dropped. "But I thought, they've accelerated the timeline. There's a crisis with the European operations. They need someone in place immediately." Victoria's laugh was hollow. "It's everything I've worked for, the opportunity of a lifetime. So why do you look like someone just sentenced you to prison?" The question was too personal, too direct for an employee to ask his boss. But they were past that now, whether they acknowledged it or not. Victoria met his eyes, and Ethan saw the answer before she spoke. "Because I just realized I don't want it." The words hung between them as their boarding group was called. They filed onto the plane in silence, took their seats, first class, side by side, because of course Victoria had upgraded both their tickets. As Denver fell away beneath them, Ethan felt the weight of what she'd said. She didn't want the promotion, the thing she'd spent 20 years building toward, the culmination of every sacrifice and strategic decision. She didn't want it. Which meant what? That she was going to turn it down? Walk away from a corner office and executive leadership and everything she'd worked for? And if she did, what would that mean for him? For them? "Ethan." Victoria's voice was so quiet he almost missed it over the engine noise. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." "If you could start over, if you could go back and choose differently, would you?" Ethan thought about Claire, about Sophie, about the life he'd built from grief and determination. "No," he said honestly. "I wouldn't change Sophie. I wouldn't change being her father, but I'd change other things. I'd work less. I'd be more present. I'd stop thinking that providing for her and being with her were the same thing." Victoria nodded slowly. "That's what I'm afraid of. That I'll look back in 20 years and realize I spent my entire life optimizing for the wrong things." "So don't wait 20 years. Ethan shifted in his seat to face her more fully. "You said yourself, you don't want the New York position, so turn it down." "And do what, become a high school English teacher at 42? "Why not?" "Because I have a life, Ethan. A mortgage. Responsibilities. I can't just—" "Can't you?" Kept his voice gentle. "You're financially secure. You're talented. You have options. The only thing stopping you is fear." Victoria's eyes flashed. "That's easy for you to say. You have Sophie. You have a reason to make sacrifices. What do I have?" "What do you want to have?" The question stopped her cold. Ethan watched her struggle with it, saw the war between who she was and who she'd been trying to be for 20 years. She stopped, started again. I want to wake up and not dread the day. I want to have a conversation that matters. I want to do work that changes someone's life, even if it's just one student who learns to love reading. Her voice dropped to a whisper. I want to matter to someone as more than just my job title. Then do it. Ethan knew he was pushing, knew it wasn't his place, but he couldn't watch her sentence herself to 20 more years of misery. Turn down New York. Find a teaching position. Start living instead of just succeeding. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. You just choose. Victoria closed her eyes, leaning back against the seat. You make choosing sound easy, like it's just a matter of decision. It's not easy, but it's simple. Ethan thought about the night Claire died, the choice he'd made to keep going for Sophie. You decide what matters, and then you protect it. They flew in silence for a while, and Ethan tried to focus on work emails, on the normal rhythms of his life, but he kept coming back to Victoria's confession. I want to matter to someone as more than just my job title. She mattered to him, not as his boss, not as the gatekeeper to his promotion, as herself. As the woman who'd admitted she was lonely, who'd slept peacefully in a hotel room, who'd shown him her cracks and trusted him not to break her further. And that was dangerous. Because wanting someone who controlled your career was a recipe for disaster. Because even if Victoria left Harrison in lock, even if she turned down the promotion, the power imbalance would still exist in the history between them. Because Sophie deserved a father who made choices based on her well-being, not his own loneliness. I'm going to turn it down, Victoria said suddenly. Ethan's head snapped up. What? The New York position. I'm going to turn it down. She opened her eyes, and Ethan saw something new there. Fear, yes, but also determination. You're right. I've been running in the wrong direction, and I need to stop before I run out of time to change course. Victoria, I know it's crazy. I know everyone will think I've lost my mind, but I can't spend another 20 years doing work that doesn't matter to chase a life I don't want. She turned to face him fully. Last night, you asked me what I wanted, and this morning, I finally know. I want to teach. I want to make a difference in ways that aren't measured in quarterly earnings. I want to build a life, not just a career. Ethan's chest felt tight. That's amazing. That's brave. It's terrifying. Victoria's laugh was shaky. But being terrified feels more alive than I've felt in years. The plane began its descent, and Ethan felt the pressure change in his ears, in his chest. This was it. They'd land, return to their lives, and everything would be different. Victoria would leave Harrison in lock. He'd get his promotion. They'd go back to being strangers. Except they'd never be strangers again. Not after last night. Not after this morning. They'd seen each other too clearly for that. What happens now? Ethan asked quietly. Victoria's smile was sad. Now we land. You go home to your daughter. I submit my resignation. We move forward with our lives. Separately. It wasn't a question, but Victoria answered anyway. Yes, separately. The word felt like a door closing, and Ethan tried to tell himself it was for the best. Tried to remember all the reasons why getting involved with Victoria was a bad idea. Tried to focus on Sophie, on stability, on the promotion that would secure their future. But all he could think about was the way Victoria had looked when she'd said, "Me too." The way her vulnerability had matched his own. The way for just a few hours in a hotel room during a storm, he'd felt seen and understood in ways he hadn't since Claire died. The wheels touched down with a bump that felt like finality. Denver disappeared behind them, and with it, the strange suspended reality where they'd been just two people instead of boss and employee. They walked through the airport in silence, and at baggage claim, Victoria turned to him with her professional mask firmly in place. Thank you, Mr. Cole, for your excellent work on the merger. I'll make sure your promotion is processed immediately. Mr. Cole. Not Ethan. Back to titles and distance and safety. Thank you, Ms. Hayes. Ethan matched her formality, even though it felt like a betrayal of everything they'd shared. I appreciate the opportunity. They shook hands, a brief professional gesture that somehow felt more intimate than anything that had happened in the hotel room. And then Victoria walked away, her heels clicking on the polished floor, her spine straight, her armor impenetrable. Ethan stood there with his carry-on and watched her disappear into the crowd, and he knew with absolute certainty that something had fundamentally changed. Whether it was for better or worse, he couldn't say. But nothing would be the same again. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "Sophie can't wait to see you. Hurry home." Home. His daughter, his real life, waiting for him outside this strange interlude. Ethan shouldered his bag and headed for the exit, trying to shake the feeling that he was walking away from something important, something that mattered, something he might never find again. Sophie launched herself at Ethan the moment he walked through his mother's front door, her small body colliding with his legs with enough force to make him stumble. He dropped his bag and caught her, lifting her up even though she was getting too big for it, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo and the chocolate chip cookies his mother always made when Sophie visited. "Daddy, you're home! Did you bring me something from Denver?" Ethan's chest tightened with guilt. He'd been so caught up in the storm, in Victoria, in conversations that shouldn't have happened, that he'd completely forgotten his daughter's request. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. The storm happened so fast I didn't have time to find you anything." Sophie's face fell for exactly 3 seconds before she recovered with the resilience of childhood. "That's okay. Grandma and I made cookies, and we found 3 new constellations, and I finished my whole book about Triceratops. Did you know they had 800 teeth?" "I did not know that." Ethan set her down, ran a hand through her hair. "That's a lot of teeth. For eating plants, they were herbivores, which means..." "Ethan." His mother appeared from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a dish towel, and the look she gave him was pure maternal assessment. She saw too much, always had. "You look exhausted." "Long trip." He kept his voice light, aware that Sophie was watching. "But successful. The merger's moving forward. And the promotion?" His mother's eyes were sharp. "Should be finalized this week." Ethan managed a smile. "We did it, Mom. Things are going to get better." His mother studied him for another long moment, then seemed to accept what he wasn't saying. "Sophie, why don't you show Daddy the star chart you made?" As Sophie dragged him toward the living room, chattering about Orion's belt and the difference between planets and stars, Ethan tried to focus. This was his life. This beautiful, exhausting, wonderful child who needed him present, not distracted by impossible situations with his soon-to-be former boss. But even as he admired Sophie's carefully labeled chart, even as he listened to her explain the mythology behind each constellation, part of his mind was still in that hotel room, still watching Victoria's face crack open with vulnerability, still hearing her say, "I want to matter," to someone. The week that followed felt like living in 2 worlds simultaneously. At work, everything moved with bureaucratic precision. The merger paperwork was processed, filed, approved. Ethan's promotion was announced in a company-wide email with the standard corporate language about rewarding excellence and investing in talent. His colleagues congratulated him with varying degrees of sincerity, and he moved into his new office. Still small, still nothing like Victoria's, but a window and a door that closed. Regional director. He'd done it. Everything he'd worked for, secured, and yet it felt hollow in ways he couldn't explain to anyone who asked. Victoria was conspicuously absent. Meetings were rescheduled, delegated to her second-in-command. The few times Ethan saw her in the hallway, she offered a professional nod and kept walking. The woman who'd confessed her loneliness, who'd slept peacefully beside him, who'd decided to turn down New York. She'd vanished completely behind the executive mask. Ethan told himself it was for the best. They'd had a moment of connection during a crisis, nothing more. People said things during storms that they didn't mean in sunlight. Whatever had passed between them was already fading, becoming unreal. Except it didn't fade. At night, after Sophie was asleep, Ethan would stand at his kitchen window and think about Victoria's question. "If you could start over, would you?" And his own answer, equally weighted with regret and acceptance. On Thursday, the company-wide email arrived. Victoria Hayes would be stepping down from her position, effective immediately, to pursue other opportunities. The announcement was brief, professional, and gave no real explanation. The speculation started within minutes. Was she fired? Did she take a better offer? Was there a scandal being quietly buried? Ethan stared at his computer screen and felt something crack in his chest. She'd done it, actually done it. Walked away from 20 years of climbing for a chance at something different. He wanted to call her, to ask if she was okay, to tell her it was brave and terrifying and exactly right. But he didn't have her personal number, and calling through company channels now seemed inappropriate. She'd made her choice. He needed to respect it. Friday afternoon, Ethan was in his new office reviewing quarterly projections when his assistant knocked on the door. "Mr. Cole? There's a Ms. Hayes here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she said it's important." Ethan's heart kicked against his ribs. "Send her in." Victoria walked through his door looking nothing like the executive he'd known for 6 years. She wore jeans, actual jeans, and a simple sweater, her hair loose around her shoulders instead of twisted into its usual severe style. She looked younger, more uncertain, more human. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, and her voice was different too, softer, less commanding. "I know I don't work here anymore, so I shouldn't just show up, but I wanted to tell you in person." "Tell me what?" Ethan stood, came around his desk, suddenly aware of how small his office was with both of them in it. "I got a job, teaching position at Lincoln High School, starting in the fall." Victoria's smile was tentative, almost shy. "10th grade English. It's everything I said I wanted, and I'm absolutely terrified." "That's amazing." Ethan felt genuine happiness for her, mixed with something more complicated. "You're really doing it." "I'm really doing it." She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, a nervous gesture he'd never seen from controlled, composed Victoria Hayes. "I wanted to thank you for what you said on the plane, about choosing what matters. It gave me the courage to actually follow through." "You would have found the courage anyway." "Maybe, but it helped, hearing it from someone who'd made similar choices." She paused, seemed to gather herself. "And I wanted to apologize for the way I handled things at the airport. The professional distance, calling you Mr. Cole after everything we'd talked about." Ethan's throat felt tight. "You were protecting yourself, I understand." "I was scared." Victoria met his eyes. "I'm still scared of making the wrong choice, of throwing away my career for some fantasy, of ending up alone and broke and full of regrets." "But you're doing it anyway." "I'm doing it anyway." Her smile was stronger now. "Because being scared of change is less terrifying than being miserable for the rest of my life." They stood there in Ethan's small office, and the air between them felt charged with possibility and danger in equal measure. Victoria was no longer his boss. The power imbalance that had made anything between them impossible was gone. She was just a woman who'd made a brave choice, standing in front of a man who understood exactly how hard that choice had been. "Victoria," Ethan started, then stopped, unsure what he wanted to say. "I should go." She took a step back, rebuilding distance. "I just wanted you to know that you made a difference, that our conversation mattered." She was almost to the door when Ethan's resolve cracked. "Wait." Victoria turned, her hand on the door frame. "Would you want to get coffee sometime?" The words came out rushed, uncertain. "Not as colleagues, just as people who understand each other." He watched her face transform, surprise, hope, fear, all flickering across her features in rapid succession. "I'd like that," she said quietly. "I'd like that very much." They exchanged numbers, made tentative plans for the following week, and when Victoria left, Ethan sat in his new office and tried to process what had just happened. He'd asked his former boss on a date. Or something like a date. A meeting between two people who'd seen each other's vulnerabilities and couldn't quite let that go. It should have felt wrong, dangerous, like jeopardizing everything he'd worked for. Instead, it felt like the first honest thing he'd done in years. The weekend stretched long and strange. Ethan took Sophie to the Natural History Museum, let her drag him through the dinosaur exhibits for the 100th time, and tried to be present, but his mind kept drifting to Tuesday afternoon, to coffee with Victoria, to possibilities he shouldn't be considering. "Daddy, you're not listening." Sophie's voice cut through his distraction. "I'm sorry, sweetheart. What did you say?" "I said, are you happy about your new job?" Sophie looked up at him with Claire's eyes, too perceptive for 7 years old. You got the promotion you wanted, but you seem sad. Ethan knelt down to her level. I'm not sad. I'm just thinking about a lot of things. About Mommy? The question caught him off guard. Sophie didn't talk about Claire often. She'd been so young when Claire died that her memories were more feeling than fact. Sometimes. Do you think about Mommy? Sometimes I try to remember what she sounded like. Sophie's voice was matter-of-fact in the way children had of discussing enormous things. But I can't really. Grandma shows me videos and I can see her, but it's like watching a movie, not like remembering. Ethan's chest ached. I'm sorry, baby. It's okay. Sophie tilted her head, studying him. Grandma says Mommy would want you to be happy. Is that true? Yeah. Ethan's voice was rough. That's true. Then why aren't you happy? The question was so simple, so direct, that Ethan couldn't dodge it. Being happy is complicated when you're a grown-up. Why? Because you have to think about other people, about what's responsible and safe. You can't just do what you want. Sophie considered this with the seriousness of a philosopher. But if Mommy wants you to be happy, and I want you to be happy, then being happy is what other people want, so it's not selfish. The logic was so clear, so unburdened by adult complications, that Ethan almost laughed. You're pretty smart, you know that? I know. Sophie grinned, then grabbed his hand. Come on, I want to show you the new pterodactyl exhibit. As she pulled him toward the flying reptile display, Ethan thought about her words. Being happy is what other people want, so it's not selfish. Could it really be that simple? Could letting himself want Victoria, pursue Victoria, be happy with Victoria, actually be the right choice instead of a betrayal? Or was he just rationalizing, finding excuses to do what he wanted instead of what was safe? Tuesday arrived with the inevitability of sunrise. Ethan dropped Sophie at school, sat through 2 meetings that required his new regional director authority, and then found himself at the coffee shop 20 minutes early, nervous as a teenager on a first date. Victoria arrived exactly on time, and Ethan's breath caught at the sight of her. She wore a dress, casual, floral, nothing like the severe suits he was used to. And her hair was down again, soft around her face. She looked like someone's friend, someone's date, someone's future. Not like the senior vice president who'd terrified junior analysts with a raised eyebrow. Hi. She slid into the chair across from him, and her smile was genuine but uncertain. I wasn't sure you'd actually show up. Why wouldn't I? Because this is strange. We're strange. She wrapped her hands around her coffee cup like she needed something to hold on to. A month ago, I was your boss. Now we're here, having coffee, and I don't know what the rules are anymore. Maybe we don't need rules. Ethan leaned forward. Maybe we just talk like we did in Denver. In Denver, we were trapped by a storm. We had an excuse for honesty. Victoria's eyes were vulnerable. What's our excuse now? We don't need one. Ethan reached across the table, not quite touching her hand, but close enough to make his intention clear. You asked me once if I was lonely. I said yes. That's still true, and I think it's true for you too. It is. Victoria's voice was barely above a whisper. I've been alone for so long, I forgot what it felt like to be seen. And then you asked me how I was doing, and something cracked open. I can't close it again. Then don't. They sat there in the coffee shop, 2 people who'd found each other in a storm and couldn't quite let go. And Ethan felt the weight of possibility pressing down on him. This could be something. Victoria could be someone who mattered, who understood, who saw him as more than just Sophie's dad or the guy from accounting who got lucky. But it was also complicated. She was still finding herself, still figuring out who she was outside of her career. He had a daughter who had to come first, always. They were both carrying damage and loneliness and years of choosing wrong. I don't know how to do this, Victoria said. I don't know how to be with someone. I've spent 20 years married to my career. I don't know what a relationship looks like when it's not built on professional advancement. Neither do I. Ethan thought of Claire, of the life they'd built before cancer stole it. My wife and I met in college. We grew up together. I don't know how to date as an adult with a child and responsibilities and baggage. So we're both disasters. Apparently, Ethan smiled. But maybe that's okay. Maybe we figure it out together. Victoria studied him for a long moment, and Ethan saw her weighing risks and possibilities the way she'd once weighed merger proposals. I need to be honest with you about something. Okay. I'm attracted to you. I have been for longer than I want to admit. The confession came out steady, brave. But I'm also terrified of being the reason you lose focus on your daughter, of becoming another obligation, another thing you have to juggle. I won't be that person. You wouldn't be. Ethan said it with certainty he wasn't sure he felt. Sophie comes first, always. But that doesn't mean there's no room for anything else. Doesn't it? Victoria's expression was pained. You said yourself that you have to be perfect because single fathers get judged. What happens when you start seeing someone? When your daughter has to share you with another person? The question hit hard because it was one Ethan had been avoiding. What would it mean for Sophie if he started dating Victoria? How would he explain it? How would he balance his daughter's needs with his own desire for adult companionship? I don't know, he admitted, but I know that Claire would want me to be happy. Sophie said as much last weekend. And I know that being alone for the rest of my life isn't sustainable. At some point, I have to try. At some point. But does it have to be now? With me? Victoria's voice was gentle. Ethan, I'm 42 years old. If I want children, if that's part of my future, I'm running out of time. I need to figure out who I am and what I want. I can't do that while also navigating a relationship with someone who has to prioritize his daughter. The words were a door closing, and Ethan felt the loss of something that hadn't even begun. So this is goodbye. This is not yet. Victoria reached across the table, took his hand. The contact was electric. I'm not ready. You're not ready. But that doesn't mean never. It just means not now. Ethan wanted to argue, wanted to say that timing was never perfect, that waiting might mean losing each other entirely, that the connection they'd found was rare enough to be worth the risk. But he looked at Victoria's face and saw his own uncertainty reflected back. She was right. They were both standing at crossroads, trying to figure out which direction to walk. Adding the complication of each other might mean both of them ending up lost. Not yet, he echoed, but maybe someday. Maybe someday. Victoria squeezed his hand, then let go. In the meantime, I need a friend, someone who understands what it's like to choose differently. Can we be that for each other? It wasn't what Ethan wanted, but it was honest, and maybe that was more important. Yeah, we can be friends. We can be... They finished their coffee talking about safer things, Victoria's nervousness about teaching, Ethan's adjustment to his new role, Sophie's latest dinosaur obsession. The conversation flowed easily, naturally, and Ethan was reminded of why he'd been drawn to Victoria in the first place. She was smart, funny, in a dry way, genuinely interested in his life. She asked about Sophie with real curiosity, not the polite disinterest most childless adults showed. When they parted outside the coffee shop, Victoria hugged him, a brief, friendly embrace that somehow felt more intimate than anything that had happened in Denver. Thank you, she said, for pushing me, for seeing me, for being honest. Thank you for the same. Ethan watched her walk away, and this time it felt different than at the airport. Not like an ending, but like a pause, a story suspended, waiting to see what happened next. The weeks that followed fell into a new rhythm. Ethan dove into his promotion, learning the broader scope of regional operations, managing teams he'd never supervised before. The work was challenging, demanding, exactly what he'd worked toward. And it was also exactly what Victoria had warned him about. More hours, more travel, more time away from Sophie. He tried to balance it. Left work at 5 whenever possible. Turned down weekend commitments, made every school event, every parent-teacher conference, every bedtime story that he could. But there were still nights when he'd get home at 7 and Sophie would already be at his mother's house, already fed and bathed and one day closer to growing up without him noticing. Victoria texted occasionally, updates about her teaching certification program, questions about navigating a career change at 42, occasional observations that made him laugh. Their friendship was careful, boundaried, safe. And Ethan told himself that safe was good, that he was making the right choice by not pushing for more. But in the quiet moments, late at night when Sophie was asleep and the apartment was too empty, he thought about the hotel room in Denver, about Victoria's confession that she was lonely, about the possibility of being seen and understood and less alone. He thought about it more than he should. 6 weeks after Victoria left Harrison and Locke, Ethan's mother cornered him during Sunday dinner. Sophie was in the living room, engrossed in a documentary about the Jurassic period, giving them a rare moment of privacy. "You're distracted," his mother said, loading the dishwasher with the efficiency of decades of practice. "Has been since Denver. Want to talk about it?" "Nothing to talk about." Ethan dried a plate with unnecessary focus. "Work is good. Sophie's great. Everything's fine." Ethan Michael Cole. His mother's use of his full name was a warning sign. "I raised you. I know when you're lying. And I know when you're miserable while pretending everything's fine." "I'm not miserable?" "No. But you're not happy either." She took the plate from him, set it aside, and turned him to face her. "Is it the woman from Denver, your boss?" "Former boss, and it's complicated." "Life is complicated. That's not an excuse for being alone." His mother's expression softened. "Honey, you've been surviving for 3 years, taking care of Sophie, building your career, holding everything together through sheer force of will. But surviving isn't the same as living." "I know." Ethan's voice was rough. "But I don't know how to do both. How to be there for Sophie and also have something for myself." "You do both by trying, by being honest with yourself and with Sophie about what you need." His mother squeezed his arm. "Claire would want you to be happy. She'd want Sophie to see her father living fully, not just going through the motions." "Victoria and I agreed to wait, to figure ourselves out first. And how's that working for you?" Ethan laughed despite everything. "It's sensible, responsible, safe. It's also cowardly." His mother's words were gentle but firm. "You're both using timing as an excuse because you're scared, but there's never a perfect time. There's just now and what you choose to do with it." From the living room, Sophie called out, "Daddy, come see this! They found a new dinosaur with feathers." Ethan looked at his mother, saw the understanding in her eyes, and felt something shift. She was right. He'd been hiding behind responsibility and timing and Sophie's needs. But maybe what Sophie actually needed was to see her father being brave enough to want something for himself. Maybe they both needed that. That night, after Sophie was in bed, Ethan pulled out his phone and stared at Victoria's number. His thumb hovered over the call button for a full minute before he found the courage to press it. She answered on the 3rd ring. "Ethan, is everything okay?" "Yeah, He paused, searching for words. "I wanted to hear your voice." The silence on the other end stretched long enough that Ethan wondered if he'd made a mistake. Then Victoria laughed, soft and genuine. "I'm glad you called. I've been thinking about you too." "Yeah?" "Yeah." He could hear the smile in her voice. "Classes start next week. I'm terrified and excited and completely unprepared. I keep thinking about what you said about choosing what matters. How does it feel now that it's real? Like jumping off a cliff." Victoria paused. "But also like I'm finally flying instead of falling." They talked for an hour, about her preparations for teaching, about Ethan's struggles with work-life balance, about Sophie's latest dinosaur facts. The conversation was easy, comfortable, and Ethan realized how much he'd missed this. Not just Victoria, but connection. Adult conversation that went deeper than work or parenting logistics. "I miss you," he said before he could stop himself. "I know we said not yet, but I miss you." Victoria's breath caught audibly. "I miss you too. More than I expected to. So maybe..." Ethan gathered his courage. "Maybe we try. Not perfectly. Not with all the answers figured out. Just try and see what happens." "What about Sophie? Sophie wants me to be happy. She said so herself." Ethan thought about his daughter's simple logic, her clear understanding that his happiness mattered. "And I think I could be happy with you, if you're willing to risk it." "I'm terrified," Victoria admitted. "Me too. I don't know how to be in a relationship. I'll probably mess it up." "I'll probably mess it up too." Ethan smiled. "We can mess it up together." Victoria laughed, and the sound was lighter than anything he'd heard from her before. "Okay, let's try, but slowly. I want to meet Sophie properly. I want to do this right." "Slowly," Ethan agreed. "We have time." They made plans for the weekend, a casual lunch, nothing formal, just the three of them. Ethan would introduce Victoria as a friend, let Sophie get to know her without pressure or expectations. They'd take it one step at a time, figure it out as they went. After they hung up, Ethan stood in his quiet apartment and felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Hope. Not the grim determination to survive, not the strategic planning for Sophie's future. Just simple, uncomplicated hope that maybe, possibly, he could have more than just responsibility and routine. He checked on Sophie one more time before bed. She was sprawled across her mattress, her dinosaur nightlight casting shadows on the walls, one arm clutching her favorite stuffed triceratops. She looked so small, so vulnerable, and Ethan felt the familiar weight of wanting to protect her from everything. But maybe protecting her didn't mean shielding her from change. Maybe it meant showing her that it was okay to want things, to be brave, to choose happiness even when it was complicated. "Sweet dreams, Soph," he whispered, kissing her forehead. "Daddy's going to try to be braver for you." Sophie didn't wake, but she smiled in her sleep, and Ethan took it as permission. Saturday morning dawned clear and bright, perfect weather for the park lunch he'd planned. Sophie was vibrating with excitement about meeting Daddy's friend, asking 100 questions Ethan tried to answer honestly without over-explaining. "Is she nice?" "Very nice." "Does she like dinosaurs?" "I don't know. You'll have to ask her." "Is she pretty?" Ethan hesitated. "Yeah, she is." Sophie studied him with those two perceptive eyes. "Are you nervous?" "A little." "Why?" "Because I want you two to like each other." Sophie considered this seriously. "I'll try my best to like her if you want me to." The simple offer made Ethan's throat tight. "Thanks, sweetheart. That means a lot." Victoria was already there when they arrived, sitting on a bench with a nervous energy Ethan recognized. She'd dressed carefully, jeans and a soft sweater, nothing too formal, but clearly chosen with thought. When she saw them approaching, she stood, and Ethan saw the fear and hope warring on her face. "Sophie," Ethan said gently, "this is my friend Victoria. Victoria, this is my daughter Sophie." Victoria knelt down to Sophie's level, a gesture Ethan appreciated more than he could say. "It's so nice to meet you, Sophie. Your dad talks about you all the time." Sophie tilted her head, assessing. "He talks about you too. He says you're his friend." "I am." Victoria's smile was genuine. "I hope we can be friends too." "Do you like dinosaurs?" Victoria laughed, surprised. "I don't know very much about them, but I'd love to learn." That was apparently the right answer because Sophie's face lit up. "I know everything about dinosaurs. Did you know that some of them had feathers? And the T-Rex couldn't run as fast as movies show because it would break its legs? And..." As Sophie launched into an enthusiastic lecture, Ethan caught Victoria's eye over his daughter's head. The look they shared was complicated. Gratitude, nervousness, hope, and something deeper that Ethan wasn't ready to name yet. But it felt like a beginning. And for the first time since Claire died, a beginning felt like enough. They spent 2 hours at the park, and Ethan watched something unexpected unfold. Victoria listened to Sophie's dinosaur monologue with genuine interest, asking questions that showed she was actually paying attention. When Sophie insisted on demonstrating how different dinosaurs walked, Victoria gamely participated, earning delighted giggles when she attempted a velociraptor stance. And when Sophie scraped her knee on the playground equipment, Victoria was the one who pulled a bandage from her purse. Not a generic adhesive strip, but one decorated with cartoon planets and stars. "I thought you might like space too," Victoria said softly as she applied it. "Most kids who love dinosaurs also love astronomy." Sophie's eyes went wide. "I do. Daddy and I look at constellations. Did you know that stars are actually suns that are really far away?" "I did know that," Victoria smiled. "Did you know that some of those stars died millions of years ago, but their light is still reaching us?" "Like dinosaurs. They're gone, but we can still see them in fossils." Sophie bounced excitedly. "You're smart like Daddy." The casual comparison made Victoria's eyes glisten, and Ethan felt something in his chest expand. This was what he hadn't known he was missing, someone who could connect with Sophie, who saw his daughter as more than just an obligation or obstacle. After lunch, Sophie asked if Victoria could come see her room, her rock collection, her books about prehistoric life. Ethan expected Victoria to politely decline, to maintain appropriate boundaries. Instead, she looked at him with a question in her eyes, and when he nodded, she said yes. The drive back to Ethan's apartment felt surreal. Victoria in his passenger seat, Sophie chattering from the back about the new dinosaur exhibit opening next month. This was his life. The daily routines, the modest apartment, the reality of single parenthood, not the polished professional world where he and Victoria had first known each other. If she was overwhelmed by the difference, she didn't show it. She admired Sophie's carefully organized rock collection, listened to explanations about sedimentary versus igneous formations, and genuinely seemed interested in the distinction between a paleontologist and an archaeologist. "You're really good with her," Ethan said quietly, while Sophie was in the bathroom. They were standing in his small living room, surrounded by the comfortable chaos of a 7-year-old's life. Books scattered across the coffee table, Sophie's backpack dumped by the door, drawings taped to the refrigerator. "She's easy to be good with." Victoria picked up one of the drawings, a detailed rendering of a stegosaurus. "She's remarkable, Ethan. Smart and curious and so full of life. You've done an incredible job. Some days I'm not sure." Ethan moved closer, lowering his voice. "Some days I feel like I'm barely holding it together. Like I'm failing her by working too much, or failing my job by leaving too early, or just failing in general." Victoria turned to face him fully. "You're not failing. You're showing up. Every single day you're showing up for her. That's what matters." Before Ethan could respond, Sophie bounced back into the room. "Victoria, do you want to stay for dinner? Daddy makes really good spaghetti. He lets me help with the sauce." Victoria looked at Ethan, and he saw the hesitation, the awareness that staying for dinner would cross another line. But he also saw the want, the desire to be part of this simple domestic scene. "If it's okay with your dad," Victoria said carefully. "Please, Daddy." Sophie turned her pleading eyes on him, the look that worked approximately 90% of the time. Ethan smiled. "Sure, we'd love to have you." Cooking dinner with Victoria and Sophie in his small kitchen was both wonderful and terrifying. Sophie appointed herself head chef, ordering both adults around with the confidence of someone who'd been making sauce with her father for years. Victoria followed instructions without complaint, chopping vegetables with surprising competence while listening to Sophie explain the importance of fresh basil. "My mommy used to make sauce too," Sophie said suddenly, her voice matter of fact. "Daddy says I got her recipe exactly right." The mention of Claire landed like a stone in still water. Ethan tensed, waiting for Sophie's mood to shift the way it sometimes did when she mentioned her mother. But Sophie just kept stirring the pot, unbothered by the weight of what she'd said. Victoria met Ethan's eyes across the kitchen. "Your mommy must have been a very good cook." "She was good at lots of things." Sophie's voice was proud. "Daddy says she was brave and smart, and she would have loved me very much." "I'm sure she did love you very much," Victoria said softly. "And I'm sure she'd be very proud of the person you're becoming." Sophie considered this seriously. "Grandma says Mommy would want Daddy to be happy. Are you making Daddy happy?" The directness of the question froze both adults. Ethan opened his mouth, unsure how to navigate this, but Victoria answered before he could. "I hope so," she said honestly. "Your daddy is a very special person. He makes me happy too." Sophie nodded, apparently satisfied. "Good. Daddy's been sad for a long time. I want him to smile more." The casual observation hit Ethan like a punch. He'd thought he'd hidden it well, thought Sophie didn't notice the weight he carried. But of course she had. Children saw everything, understood more than adults gave them credit for. "I smile," he protested weakly. "Not like you used to." Sophie looked up at him with Claire's eyes. "In the pictures with Mommy, you smiled different, bigger. I want you to smile like that again." Victoria's hand found his across the counter, a brief squeeze of support and understanding. "Then we'll have to make sure he has lots of reasons to smile," she told Sophie. Dinner was chaotic and loud and perfect. Sophie dominated the conversation, jumping between topics with the ADD logic of childhood, dinosaurs to space to her friend Emma's birthday party, to why dogs couldn't eat chocolate. Victoria kept pace, asking follow-up questions, sharing stories from her own childhood that made Sophie giggle. Watching them together, Ethan felt the fear he'd been carrying start to ease. This could work. Victoria and Sophie could work. Maybe they already were. After dinner, Sophie insisted on showing Victoria her bedtime routine, which apparently now included giving Victoria a tour of her night sky projector. Ethan stood in the doorway and watched Victoria lying on Sophie's floor, both of them staring at the ceiling while Sophie pointed out constellations. That's Cassiopeia. She was a queen who was really vain, so the gods put her in the sky upside down as punishment. And that's Orion. He was a hunter. Daddy says if you follow his belt, you can find other stars. Your daddy knows a lot about stars, Victoria said. He knows about lots of things. Sophie rolled onto her side, propping her head on her hand. Are you going to be around a lot now? Like, are you Daddy's girlfriend? Ethan's heart stopped. He should intervene, redirect the conversation, protect Victoria from having to answer. But Victoria just smiled at his daughter with complete openness. I'd like to be around, if that's okay with you, she said carefully. Your daddy and I care about each other, but we're taking things slowly, figuring out how to fit into each other's lives. Nothing's going to change for you unless you want it to. I want Daddy to be happy, Sophie said simply. If you make him happy, then I want you around. The unconditional acceptance, the childlike simplicity of it, made Victoria's eyes fill with tears. She blinked them back quickly, but Ethan saw the moment his daughter's blessing broke through Victoria's remaining walls. I think it's time for bed, Soph, Ethan said gently. Say goodnight to Victoria. Sophie scrambled up and without warning threw her arms around Victoria's neck. Good night. Thank you for learning about dinosaurs with me. Victoria hugged her back, careful and tender. Thank you for teaching me. I had a wonderful time. Ethan tucked Sophie in, kissed her forehead, and found Victoria waiting in the hallway when he emerged. Her face was composed, but he could see the emotion just beneath the surface. She's incredible, Victoria whispered. Ethan, she's everything. Yeah. His voice was rough. She is. They moved to the living room, suddenly awkward now that Sophie's buffer was gone. Victoria sat on the couch, and Ethan joined her, leaving a careful foot of space between them. I'm sorry if she put you on the spot, Ethan said. The girlfriend question. She's direct. Don't apologize. Victoria turned to face him. She has every right to ask. This affects her life too. She paused. For what it's worth, I meant what I said. I do want to be around. I want to see where this goes. Even with all the complications, the baggage, the reality that Sophie will always come first? Especially with all of that. Victoria's smile was soft. I spent 20 years avoiding complications, avoiding anything that couldn't be controlled or strategized. It made my life simple. It also made it empty. She reached across the space between them, took his hand. You and Sophie aren't simple, but you're real. And I'd rather have complicated and real than simple and hollow. Ethan looked at their joined hands, at this woman who'd walked away from everything she'd built for a chance at something different. I'm scared, he admitted, of messing this up, of letting Sophie get attached and then having it fall apart, of losing focus on being the father she needs. I'm scared too. Victoria's thumb traced circles on his palm. Of not being enough, of wanting children of my own and resenting that I can't have them, of being 42 years old and starting over in every aspect of my life. She met his eyes. But I'm more scared of not trying. The honesty hung between them, vulnerable and brave. Ethan thought about what his mother had said, about surviving versus living, about what Sophie had observed, that he didn't smile the way he used to, about the hotel room in Denver where he'd seen Victoria truly, and she'd seen him the same way. Okay, he said. We try, really try. Not just as friends, but as whatever we could be. Whatever we could be, Victoria echoed. That's terrifying. Yeah. Ethan shifted closer, closing the distance between them. But maybe that's the point. Maybe the things worth having are supposed to be terrifying. He kissed her then, soft and careful, a question more than a statement. Victoria answered by leaning into him, her hand coming up to cup his face, and for the first time in 3 years, Ethan felt something other than grief and responsibility. He felt possibility. Hope. The terrifying, exhilarating sense that his life might become more than just survival. When they pulled apart, Victoria was smiling, really smiling, the expression transforming her face. "I should go," she said, but she didn't move. "I should let you get some rest." "You should," Ethan agreed, also not moving, "but I don't want you to." "Sophie needs you to be rested for morning. What time does she wake up?" 6:30, on the dot, every day. Ethan groaned. "She is relentlessly consistent. Then I definitely need to go." But Victoria kissed him again, longer this time, and when she finally stood to leave, they were both breathing harder than conversation warranted. At the door, she paused. "Next week is my first day of classes. I'm absolutely terrified." "You'll be amazing." Ethan pulled her close for one more kiss. "Those kids have no idea how lucky they are." "Text me when Sophie's asleep tomorrow?" Victoria's voice was small, vulnerable. "I want to know how tonight went. If she's okay with this." "She's more than okay. You saw her." Ethan tucked a strand of hair behind Victoria's ear. "But yes, I'll text you." After she left, Ethan stood in his quiet apartment and tried to process what had just happened. He'd introduced Victoria to Sophie. They'd had dinner together. Sophie had given her blessing. And Ethan had kissed Victoria like a man who was ready to move forward, not just survive. It was terrifying. It was too fast. It was everything he'd told himself he wasn't ready for. It was also the first time in years he'd felt truly alive. The next 3 weeks were a careful dance of building something new while maintaining everything old. Victoria started teaching, and Ethan listened to her nervous excitement over late-night phone calls after Sophie was asleep. She told him about the students who tested her, the lesson plans that flopped, the small victories that made her remember why she'd wanted this in the first place. In return, Ethan shared the challenges of his promotion, the team members who resented his rapid advancement, the travel demands he was pushing back against, the constant balancing act of being enough for everyone who needed him. They saw each other when they could, lunch on days when their schedules aligned, coffee after work, if Ethan could get his mother to pick up Sophie. One carefully planned dinner date where they talked for 3 hours and barely touched their food, too caught up in each other to notice. And slowly, carefully, Victoria became part of Sophie's routine. She came to Saturday park visits. She helped with homework when Ethan had late meetings, her English teacher skills making vocabulary assignments almost fun. She learned about dinosaurs and constellations and the specific way Sophie liked her sandwiches cut. Sophie, for her part, accepted Victoria with the adaptability of childhood. She didn't call her mom, neither Ethan nor Victoria suggested it, but she started including Victoria in her stories about school, asking if Victoria could come to things, casually mentioning when Victoria was here to her grandmother. Ethan's mother, when she finally met Victoria properly, studied her with the sharp assessment of someone who'd seen her son hurt before. But over coffee, while Sophie played in the yard, something shifted. "You're good for him," his mother said finally. "He smiles again, really smiles." Victoria's eyes were bright. "He's good for me too, him and Sophie both. They're teaching me what matters. Just don't hurt them." His mother's voice was gentle but firm. "Ethan's been through enough. And Sophie, she's already lost one mother. Don't let her lose another person she loves." "I won't." Victoria's voice was steady with conviction. "I know what this means, what they both mean to me. I'm not going anywhere." But life, as Ethan had learned the hard way, didn't care about promises or plans. The disruption came on a Tuesday afternoon, 3 months into their careful new normal. Ethan was in a budget meeting when his phone buzzed with a call from Sophie's school. He ignored it the first time. School calls during the day usually meant Sophie had forgotten her lunch or needed permission for something minor, but when they called back immediately, his stomach dropped. "Mr. Cole, this is Principal Martinez. Sophie's fine, but we need you to come pick her up. She had an incident on the playground." Ethan was out of the meeting and in his car within 2 minutes, his heart racing with every worst-case scenario a parent's mind could conjure. He called Victoria without thinking, needing to hear her voice, needing her calm. "Ethan? What's wrong?" "Sophie's school called. Something happened. They said she's fine, but I need to pick her up." He was driving too fast, forcing himself to slow down. "I'm probably overreacting, but where's the school? I'm coming." "You don't have to." "Where's the school, Ethan?" He told her, and when he pulled into the parking lot 15 minutes later, Victoria's car was already there. She was standing by the entrance, and when she saw him, she crossed the distance and pulled him into a tight hug. "She's okay," Victoria said firmly. "Whatever happened, she's okay. You've got this." Inside, they found Sophie in the nurse's office with an ice pack on her arm and tear tracks on her face. She launched herself at Ethan the moment she saw him. "Daddy, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. Emma said Mommy didn't love me because she left, and I got so mad I pushed her, and she fell, and then I fell too, and now my arm hurts, and Emma's crying, and I'm in trouble, and—" "Whoa, slow down." Ethan knelt, checking her over with frantic parental assessment. Bruise on her arm, nothing broken, no blood. "You're okay. You're safe. Everything else we can figure out." Principal Martinez appeared, her expression sympathetic but serious. "Mr. Cole, I understand this is upsetting, but we have a zero-tolerance policy for physical altercations." Sophie pushed another student. "We need to discuss appropriate consequences." The next hour was a blur of conversations with school administrators, apologies to Emma's parents, and explanations to Sophie about why pushing was never okay, even when someone said hurtful things. Through it all, Victoria stayed, quiet but present, supporting without overstepping, understanding exactly when Ethan needed her and when he needed space to parent alone. In the car afterward, Sophie was quiet, curled into herself with shame and residual anger. Ethan drove home trying to figure out how to handle this, how to discipline while also addressing the deeper hurt underneath, how to be both parent and protector. "I'm sorry I pushed Emma," Sophie said finally, her voice small. "But Daddy, why did she say Mommy didn't love me? Mommy did love me, right? Even though she died." Ethan's hands tightened on the steering wheel. This conversation, the one he'd been dreading for 7 years. "Of course Mommy loved you. She loved you more than anything in the world." "Then why did she leave?" Sophie's voice cracked. "If she loved me, why did she go away?" "She didn't choose to leave, sweetheart. She got sick. Remember we talked about this? Her body stopped working the way it was supposed to, and no matter how much she loved you, no matter how hard the doctors tried, they couldn't fix it." "But I don't remember her." Sophie's cry was anguished. I try, but I can't remember what she sounded like, or how she smelled, or what her hugs felt like. And if I can't remember her, does that mean I didn't love her enough?" Ethan pulled over, unable to drive through his own tears. He turned in his seat and pulled Sophie into his arms, holding her while she sobbed out 3 years of accumulated grief she'd been too young to process. "Not remembering doesn't mean you didn't love her," he said when she'd cried herself out. "You were 4 years old, baby. Your brain was still growing. It's not your fault you can't remember." "Do you remember?" "Every day." Ethan's voice was rough. "I remember how she laughed at bad jokes, how she sang off key while making breakfast, how she would read you the same bedtime story 17 times in a row because you loved it so much." He pulled back to look at Sophie's face. "And I promise, I will tell you every memory I have. We'll keep her alive together, okay?" Sophie nodded, hiccuping. "Okay." When they got home, Victoria was waiting on the steps. She must have given them time, must have known they needed privacy for the conversation. But now she stood, uncertain, clearly wanting to help, but unsure if she should. Sophie saw her and ran, wrapped her arms around Victoria's waist and held on. "Emma said mean things about my mommy." Victoria knelt down, eye level with Sophie. "I know. Your dad told me. That must have hurt very much." "It did." Sophie's lower lip trembled. "Is it wrong that I can't remember her?" "Oh, sweetheart, no." Victoria's voice was thick with emotion. "It's not wrong at all. But you know what? Even if you can't remember her yourself, she's still part of you. You have her eyes. Your daddy says you have her bravery and her kindness. And every time you're curious about the world, every time you care about learning and growing, that's her legacy too." "Really?" "Really." Victoria brushed Sophie's hair back from her face. "And loving new people doesn't mean forgetting the people who came before. Your heart is big enough for both." Sophie was quiet for a moment. "Do you think my mommy would like you?" The question clearly surprised Victoria. I don't know. I hope so. I think she would." Sophie's voice was matter-of-fact again, the storm passing as quickly as it had come. "Because you make Daddy smile. And you're teaching me about books and words, and you don't mind when I talk too much about dinosaurs." "I could never mind that." Victoria pulled Sophie into a hug, and over his daughter's head she met Ethan's eyes. The look they shared was complicated, grief and hope, and the weight of trying to build something new while honoring what came before. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Ethan and Victoria sat on his couch and didn't talk. Victoria just held him while he processed the day. Sophie's pain, the impossibility of protecting her from every hurt, the fear that he was failing at the most important job of his life. "You're an incredible father," Victoria said finally. "The way you handled today, letting her feel her feelings, helping her process, being honest about the hard things. Not every parent can do that." "I don't feel incredible. I feel like I'm barely keeping my head above water." "That's parenthood." Victoria's smile was sad. "From everything I've learned watching you, it's showing up even when you're overwhelmed. It's choosing your child over comfort. It's being brave enough to have hard conversations." Ethan pulled back to look at her. "You'd be a good mother." The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Victoria's face did something complicated, longing, grief, acceptance, all flickering across her features. "I don't know if that's in my future anymore," she said quietly. "I'm 42. Even if I wanted children of my own, the window is closing." "But you do want them." It wasn't a question. "Sometimes." Victoria's honesty was painful. "Sometimes I see you with Sophie and I ache for it, for that connection, that purpose. But other times I wonder if teaching is enough, if being part of Sophie's life is enough, if I can build a different kind of family than the one I always imagined. What if it's not enough?" Ethan needed to know, needed to understand what he was asking her to give up by being with him. "Then we figure it out." Victoria took his face in her hands. "Ethan, I'm not going to lie and say I have all the answers. I'm still figuring out who I am outside of my career. But I know that you and Sophie make me happier than I've been in 20 years. And I know that love isn't about perfect circumstances. It's about choosing someone anyway. Even if choosing me means giving up the chance to have your own children? You and Sophie aren't a consolation prize." Victoria's voice was firm. "You're a choice. A deliberate, conscious choice to build something real instead of chasing some fantasy that might never happen anyway." Ethan kissed her then, desperate and grateful and terrified all at once. Because Victoria was right, love wasn't about perfect circumstances. It was about showing up, being brave, choosing each other even when it was complicated. But it was also about being honest about the costs. And Ethan couldn't shake the fear that one day Victoria would wake up and resent what she'd given up for him. Over the next few weeks, things shifted in subtle ways. Sophie's outburst at school had cracked something open. Grief they'd both been avoiding, questions they'd been too scared to ask. Ethan found himself talking about Claire more, sharing stories he'd kept locked away because they hurt too much. And Sophie listened, hungry for details about the mother she couldn't remember, building a picture of Claire from Ethan's memories. Victoria was there through it all. She didn't try to replace Claire, didn't compete with a ghost. She just existed alongside the grief, making space for it while also creating new memories. And slowly, imperceptibly, they started to feel like a family. Harrison and Locke's annual Family Day arrived with the forced cheerfulness of all corporate events designed to show employees the company cared. Ethan had skipped it for the last 3 years, unable to face the parade of intact families, the casual questions about his wife. But this year felt different. Sophie wanted to go, excited about the promised face painting and bounce houses. And Victoria had encouraged him, gentle but firm. "You can't hide forever," she'd said, "and Sophie deserves to see where her daddy works, to be proud of what you've accomplished." So Ethan found himself at the park on a Saturday afternoon, watching Sophie race toward the bounce house with the single-minded determination of childhood. His former colleagues were there, people he'd worked with for years, who'd watched him struggle through grief and single parenthood, who judged him for leaving early and taking calls from the school nurse. And standing beside him, holding his hand with quiet confidence, was Victoria Hayes. The whispers started immediately. Ethan felt Victoria's hand tense in his as heads turned and conversations paused mid-sentence. He'd known this would happen, that showing up to a company event with his former boss would generate speculation and gossip. But knowing it intellectually and experiencing it in real time were two different things entirely. "Is that Victoria Hayes?" someone whispered, not quite quietly enough. "I heard she quit to become a teacher. Can you imagine? Throwing away that career? And now she's with Cole? Wasn't she his boss?" Victoria's spine straightened, her executive armor sliding into place despite the casual jeans and sweater she wore. Ethan squeezed her hand, a silent reminder that they'd anticipated this, that other people's opinions didn't define what they were building. "You okay?" he murmured. "Better than okay." Victoria's smile was genuine despite the stares. "I'm exactly where I want to be." Before Ethan could respond, Sophie came racing back, her face already painted like a butterfly, her energy boundless. "Daddy, Daddy, they have a rock climbing wall, and Ms. Jenkins from your office said she knows you, and can I please try it? Please, please, please?" "Sure, Soph." Ethan ruffled her hair, grateful for her oblivious joy. "Just be careful." Sophie grabbed Victoria's free hand. "Will you come watch me? I'm going to climb all the way to the top." "I wouldn't miss it." Victoria let herself be pulled toward the climbing wall, and Ethan followed, acutely aware of the eyes tracking their movement. Margaret Chen, one of the senior analysts who'd worked under Victoria, approached as they reached the activity area. Her expression was carefully neutral, professional courtesy barely masking curiosity. "Victoria, I didn't expect to see you here." "Hello, Margaret." Victoria's tone was pleasant but distant. "How's the European account?" "Challenging. We could have used your expertise last quarter." Margaret's eyes flicked to Ethan, then to Sophie, who was being fitted into a climbing harness. "I see you're, keeping connections with the company." The implication was clear, and Ethan felt his jaw tighten, but Victoria just smiled, unbothered. "I'm keeping connections with people I care about," she said simply. "The company is incidental." Margaret had the grace to look embarrassed. "Of course. Well, it's good to see you." As she walked away, Ethan watched Victoria's shoulders relax incrementally. "That wasn't so bad." "That was the easy one." Victoria nodded toward a cluster of executives near the food tent. "Wait until we run into someone from the leadership team." But before they could worry about it further, Sophie called out from the climbing wall, "Daddy! Victoria! Watch me!" They watched. Sophie climbed with the fearless determination of childhood, making it halfway up before her arms started shaking. Ethan's heart clenched, his instinct to call out for her to come down, to keep her safe. But Victoria's hand found his. "She's got this," Victoria said quietly. "Let her try." And she was right. Sophie pushed through the fear, found her footing, and made it to the top. When she rang the bell signaling her success, her face was pure triumph. Ethan and Victoria cheered like she'd summited Everest, and Sophie's joy was so complete, so uncontaminated by adult anxiety, that Ethan felt his chest might burst. This was what mattered. Not the whispers or the judgment or the complicated history, just Sophie's happiness, and the fact that Victoria understood how to celebrate it without diminishing it. The afternoon unfolded with surprising ease. Sophie dragged them through every activity: face painting, balloon animals, a science demonstration that involved dry ice and dramatic fog effects. Other families moved around them, some offering friendly waves, others maintaining pointed distance. Ethan recognized the pattern. People were drawing conclusions, making assumptions, deciding what his relationship with Victoria meant. He was surprised to find he didn't care as much as he'd expected. Around 3 o'clock, as Sophie was engrossed in a puppet show with other children, David Walsh appeared. The current CEO, the man who'd offered Victoria the New York position, the person whose opinion could still theoretically impact Ethan's career. He approached with the measured steps of someone comfortable with authority. "Ethan." "Victoria." His greeting was neutral, assessing. "I didn't expect to see you both here." "Mr. Walsh." Ethan kept his voice professional, aware they were being watched. "Good to see you." "David." Victoria's tone was cordial but not deferential. She'd left the company, walked away from his offer. The power dynamic had shifted. "How's New York working out?" "We brought in someone from outside. Strong candidate, though not quite what you would have brought to the role." David's eyes moved between them. "I have to say, Victoria, when you turned down the position, There was considerable speculation about your reasons. Some thought you'd lost your edge. Others suggested burnout. And what did you think? Victoria's question was direct, unafraid. David smiled slightly. I thought you'd finally figured out what actually matters. Took you long enough. The response clearly surprised Victoria. I'm not sure I understand. I've been doing this for 35 years, David said, his voice dropping to something more personal than professional. Built an empire, sacrificed everything else, and you know what I learned? Success is empty if you have no one to share it with. He looked at Ethan. Your quarterly reports are impressive. Your work on the merger was exceptional, but I've watched you for the last few months, and you know what really stands out? You leave at 5:30. You take calls from your daughter's school, you prioritize. He turned back to Victoria. And you walked away from the corner office for a chance at a real life. That's not losing your edge. That's finding your courage. Before either could respond, Sophie came running over, breathless and excited. Daddy, the puppet show was about dinosaurs and the T-Rex was actually nice, and he made friends with the Triceratops, and it was amazing. She stopped short when she saw David, suddenly shy. Ethan put a hand on her shoulder. Soph, this is Mr. Walsh. He's the boss at Daddy's company. Mr. Walsh, this is my daughter, Sophie. David knelt down with surprising grace for a man in an expensive suit. It's very nice to meet you, Sophie. Your father is one of our best people. Sophie tilted her head, assessing him with the brutal honesty of childhood. He works really hard, sometimes too hard, but Victoria helps him remember to have fun. David's smile was genuine. Does she now? Yeah, she knows about constellations, and she lets me teach her about dinosaurs, even though she's a grown-up, and grown-ups usually pretend to listen but don't really. And she makes Daddy smile the way he does in the pictures with my mommy. Sophie's voice was matter-of-fact, unburdened by the weight her words carried. I think Mommy would have liked her. Ethan's throat closed completely. Victoria's eyes glistened. And David Walsh, CEO of a multi-billion-dollar corporation, looked at the three of them with something that might have been approval or might have been envy. I think your mommy would have liked her too, David said softly. He stood, brushed off his knees, and his expression shifted back to professional. Ethan, I'd like to speak with you Monday morning, 9 o'clock, my office. After he walked away, Ethan looked at Victoria with barely controlled panic. That sounded like either a promotion or a firing. It sounded like a conversation, Victoria said calmly. Whatever it is, you'll handle it. But Ethan couldn't shake his anxiety through the rest of the event. He smiled and played with Sophie, made small talk with colleagues, presented the appropriate face. Inside, his mind raced through possibilities. Had David disapproved of his relationship with Victoria? Was the CEO meeting actually a polite prelude to termination? Had he jeopardized everything by bringing Victoria here? By making their relationship public? Sophie, blissfully unaware of adult anxiety, chattered all the way home about the puppet show and the rock-climbing wall and how she'd made a new friend named Marcus, who also loved paleontology. Victoria sat in the passenger seat, her hand on Ethan's knee, grounding him when his thoughts spiraled. After dropping Victoria at her apartment with a lingering kiss and promises to call later, Ethan drove Sophie home through the golden late-afternoon light. She was quiet now, tired from the excitement, watching the city pass by her window. Daddy? Her voice was small. Is Victoria going to be around forever? Ethan's heart clenched. I don't know, sweetheart. I hope so. But forever is a long time. Do you love her? The question was so direct, so uncomplicated by adult fears, that Ethan had to think carefully about his answer. Yes, he said finally. I do. Does she love you? I think so. We haven't said the words yet, but I think she does. Sophie nodded, processing. Good, because I love her too. Not the same way I would have loved Mommy, but different. Like she's her own person in my heart, not a replacement. Ethan had to blink back tears. That's exactly right, Soph. That's exactly how it should be. Then you should tell her about the love words. Sophie's logic was unassailable, because people need to know they're loved. That's what you always tell me. Out of the mouths of babes. Ethan smiled despite his anxiety about Monday's meeting. You're right. I should tell her. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Ethan called Victoria. She answered on the first ring, her voice soft and intimate in the darkness. "How's Sophie?" "Exhausted and happy. She asked if you were going to be around forever." Victoria's breath caught. "What did you tell her?" "That I hoped so." Ethan paused, gathering courage. "Victoria, I need to tell you something, and I know the timing is terrible. I have this meeting with David on Monday, and I'm terrified I'm about to get fired, and everything feels uncertain. But Sophie was right. You need to know." "Know what?" "I love you." The words came out steady, sure, despite the fear. "I love your courage and your honesty, and the way you listen to Sophie talk about dinosaurs like it's the most important thing in the world. I love that you walked away from everything you'd built for a chance at something real. I love who I am when I'm with you, not just surviving, but actually living." He took a breath. "And I know it's fast, and I know we're still figuring things out, but I needed you to know. I love you." The silence on the other end stretched so long that Ethan wondered if he'd made a terrible mistake. Then he heard it, a soft sob, quickly muffled. "Victoria? Are you okay?" "No one's ever said that to me before." Her voice was thick with tears. "I'm 42 years old, and no one has ever told me they love me. Not romantically, not like this." Ethan's chest ached. Then they were all fools. Victoria laughed through her tears. "I love you too. I have for weeks, maybe longer. I was just too scared to say it. Too afraid I'd mess this up, that I wasn't enough, that I'd lose you and Sophie and this life we're building. You're not going to lose us." Ethan made the promise with his whole heart. "Whatever happens Monday, whatever David wants to talk about, we'll figure it out together. That's what people who love each other do." They talked for another hour, about nothing and everything, until Victoria's voice grew sleepy and Ethan could barely keep his eyes open. When they finally hung up, Ethan lay in bed and felt the fear about Monday ease slightly. Whatever came next, he wasn't facing it alone. Monday morning arrived with the cruel efficiency of all dreaded days. Ethan dropped Sophie at school, endured her enthusiastic hug and reminder to "be brave, Daddy," and drove to the office with his stomach in knots. He dressed carefully, his best suit, the tie Victoria had complimented once, and arrived at David Walsh's office at precisely 9 o'clock. David's assistant waved him through immediately, and Ethan found the CEO standing by the window, looking out over the city. "Ethan, thank you for coming. Please, sit." Ethan sat, every muscle tense, and waited for the axe to fall. David turned from the window and surprisingly smiled. "Relax. You look like you're expecting an execution." "I wasn't sure what to expect, sir." "David, please. We're not in a board meeting." David sat across from him, not behind his desk, a deliberate choice that made the conversation feel more personal than professional. "I wanted to talk to you about your career trajectory, specifically about what you want from it." Ethan blinked. "Sir, David, I'm very happy with my current role. The promotion to regional director has been challenging and rewarding." "That's not what I asked." David leaned forward. "I asked what you want. Not what you think you should want. Not what's expected. What would make you happy?" The question echoed the one Victoria had asked herself in that hotel room months ago. Ethan thought about it carefully, honestly. "I want to do work that matters," he said finally. "I want to provide for my daughter, but I also want to be present for her, to not miss her childhood while chasing the next promotion." He paused. "And I want a life outside of work, with Victoria, building something that's ours." David nodded slowly. "That's what I thought, and that's why I'm offering you a different kind of role." Ethan's confusion must have shown, because David continued. "We're creating a new position, Director of Work-Life Integration. It's part HR, part operations, part culture building. The goal is to help Harrison and Locke become the kind of company where people like you don't have to choose between career and family, where single parents aren't penalized for school pickups, where we measure success by more than just hours logged." "I don't understand. Why me?" "Because you've lived it." David's voice was firm. "You've navigated single parenthood while building a successful career. You've made hard choices about priorities, and you've had the courage to walk away from the old model of success." He smiled. "Plus, Victoria speaks very highly of your integrity. And her judgment, I've learned, is usually impeccable. Victoria recommended me. Ethan's heart raced. She didn't recommend you for this specific role. I developed that on my own. But before she left, she made sure I understood your value to the company. Not just your analytical skills, but your character. David leaned back. The position comes with a modest raise, flexible hours, and the autonomy to build the program from scratch. You'd be reporting directly to me, and the expectation would be that you leave at 5:30 when your daughter needs you, that you model the behavior we want to encourage. Ethan sat in stunned silence. This wasn't a firing. It was an opportunity to fundamentally change how he worked, how he balanced everything, how he showed up for Sophie. I'll need to think about it, Ethan said carefully. Discuss it with Victoria and my family. Of course. Take a week. Talk to the people who matter. David stood, extending his hand. But Ethan, I hope you'll say yes. We need more people who understand that success isn't just about quarterly earnings. It's about building lives worth living. Ethan shook his hand, walked out of the office in a daze, and immediately called Victoria. How did it go? She answered before the first ring finished. Are you okay? Do you still have a job? I have a job offer. Ethan's laugh was slightly hysterical. David Walsh wants to create a new position. Director of Work-Life Integration. Flexible hours, direct report to the CEO, autonomy to build a program that helps employees balance career and family. Victoria's sharp intake of breath was audible. Ethan, that's incredible. Did you say something to him before you left? I might have mentioned that the company was losing good people because we demanded they sacrifice everything for work. Victoria's voice was careful. But this position, this opportunity, that's all him. And it's perfect for you. It's terrifying. Ethan sat in his car, processing. I'd be building something from nothing. What if I fail? What if you succeed? Victoria countered. What if you create a culture where parents don't have to choose, where work supports life instead of consuming it? Ethan, you could change everything. I need to think about it. Talk to Sophie, my mom. Figure out... Stop. Victoria's voice was gentle, but firm. You're doing it again. Looking for reasons to say no because you're scared. But sometimes the scariest choices are the right ones. Ethan thought about the hotel room in Denver, about Victoria's decision to walk away from New York, about Sophie's simple observation that people need to know they're loved. Okay, he said. Okay, I'll do it. Just like that? Just like that? Ethan felt something release in his chest, the constant tension of trying to be everything to everyone, the fear that he'd never be enough. You're right, it's scary, but it's also exactly what I want to build, not just for me and Sophie, but for everyone trying to navigate this impossible balance. Victoria's laugh was pure joy. I'm so proud of you. Come over tonight. I want to tell Sophie together, and I want to celebrate with you properly. I'll be there at 6. The conversation with Sophie that evening was simpler than Ethan anticipated. He explained the new job in terms she could understand. Daddy would be helping other parents so they could spend more time with their kids, like Daddy spent time with her. So you won't have to work so late anymore? Sophie's eyes were hopeful. Not as often. I'll still have busy times, but overall, yes. More time for us. Sophie threw her arms around him. That's the best. Can we go to the museum more? And can Victoria come with us? Absolutely. Ethan pulled her close. As often as you want. After Sophie went to bed, Ethan and Victoria sat on his couch with glasses of wine, the city lights twinkling through the window. Victoria was curled against his side, her head on his shoulder, and Ethan felt a completeness he hadn't experienced since Claire died. I've been thinking, Victoria said quietly, about what I want, about the future. Ethan's heart rate kicked up. And? I love teaching. I love my students, the work, the sense of purpose. But I also love this. You and Sophie, the life we're building. She pulled back to look at him. And I've realized I don't need to have children of my own to have a family. Sophie feels like mine in all the ways that matter. If she's okay with it, if you're okay with it, I'd like to be more than just your girlfriend. I'd like to be her, I don't know what the word is. Not mother because she has a mother even if Claire isn't here, but someone permanent in her life. Ethan's throat was tight. What are you saying? I'm saying I want to build a life with you, both of you. I want to be there for school plays and dinosaur museums and terrible knock-knock jokes. I want to fight about homework and celebrate good grades and teach Sophie that she can be anything she wants. Victoria's eyes were bright. I want forever, Ethan, with you and with her. Are you proposing to me? Ethan couldn't quite believe this was happening. Victoria laughed, wiping at her eyes. I think I am, badly, without a ring or a plan or any of the romantic gestures this deserves. But yes, I'm asking you to marry me, to let me be part of your family, to choose each other every day, even when it's complicated. Ethan pulled her close, kissed her with everything he felt, love and gratitude and wonder that this brilliant, brave woman wanted him, wanted them. Yes, he said against her lips. Yes to all of it, to forever and family and choosing each other. They held each other in the quiet of his living room, and Ethan felt the last pieces of his broken heart click into place. This wasn't replacing Claire. It was honoring her memory by choosing to live fully, to love again, to show Sophie that grief didn't have to mean the end of happiness. 6 months later, on a brilliant autumn afternoon, Ethan and Victoria stood in a small garden ceremony with Sophie between them. Sophie wore a purple dress and held a bouquet of wildflowers, her role as part of the ceremony, something they'd carefully crafted together. The officiant smiled at all three of them. Marriage is a commitment not just between two people, but between families. Today, Ethan and Victoria aren't just promising to love each other. They're promising to love and support Sophie as they build their life together. Sophie, do you have something you'd like to say? Sophie stepped forward, her voice clear and confident. I know my mommy can't be here, but Grandma says Mommy would be happy that Daddy found someone who makes him smile again. Victoria's really smart and she helps me with homework and she knows about stars and books and she doesn't mind when I talk too much about dinosaurs. She turned to Victoria. I'm glad you're going to be my family. You're not my mom, but you're my Victoria, and that's perfect. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. Victoria knelt down and pulled Sophie into a tight hug, both of them crying and laughing at once. Ethan joined them, wrapping his arms around both of his girls, and felt overwhelmingly grateful for second chances. The ceremony continued, vows exchanged, rings placed, a kiss that felt like a promise and a beginning all at once. And when they turned to face their small gathering of family and friends, Ethan's mother crying happy tears, Victoria's former students cheering, colleagues from Harrison and Locke who'd become genuine friends, Ethan saw his whole life laid out before him. The reception was held in the same park where they'd had that first lunch with Sophie. Children ran wild, including Sophie and her friend Marcus, who were currently debating whether a brachiosaurus could beat a blue whale in a fight. David Walsh gave a toast about courage and choosing what matters. Ethan's mother welcomed Victoria to the family with a fierce hug and a whispered warning to take care of her boys. As the sun set and string lights flickered to life overhead, Ethan found Victoria standing slightly apart from the celebration, watching Sophie play. He came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist. Hey, wife? Victoria leaned back against him. Hey, husband. That's going to take some getting used to. We have time. Ethan kissed her temple. What are you thinking about? About how different my life is now compared to a year ago? About how terrified I was in that hotel room in Denver, admitting I didn't know how to be happy. She turned in his arms. And about how grateful I am that you asked me how I was doing. Best question I ever asked. Best answer I ever gave. Victoria smiled. I love you, both of you. This whole beautiful, complicated, perfectly imperfect life. Sophie came running over, breathless and grass-stained. Daddy, Victoria, can we go look at the stars later? I want to show Victoria the constellation you taught me last week. Absolutely, Ethan ruffled her hair. But first, I think there's cake calling your name. Sophie dashed off toward the dessert table, and Ethan and Victoria followed more slowly, hand in hand. Around them, their families mingled, old and new, chosen and given, all of them celebrating this new beginning. A year ago, Ethan had been trapped in a hotel room with his boss during a storm, having conversations that shouldn't happen, feeling seen for the first time since his wife died. A year ago, Victoria had been a woman who'd climbed so high she'd forgotten why she was climbing, who'd sacrificed everything for a career that left her empty. Now they were a family. Imperfect, complicated, built from broken pieces and brave choices. But they were whole in the ways that mattered. They were choosing each other, every day, even when it was hard. They were teaching Sophie that love wasn't about replacing what was lost, but about making room for what could be found. As the last light faded from the sky and the first stars began to appear, Ethan looked at his daughter and his wife, his family, and felt something he hadn't felt in 3 years. Complete. Not because all the problems were solved or all the questions answered, but because he'd stopped surviving and started living. Because he'd chosen love over fear, possibility over safety, connection over isolation. Because one stormy night in Denver, a woman had asked him what he wanted, and he'd found the courage to figure it out. And it had led him here, to this moment, this family, this life that was messy and beautiful and absolutely worth every terrifying choice it took to build it. Sophie called out from across the lawn, demanding they come see something immediately important. Victoria laughed and tugged Ethan's hand. Together, they walked toward their daughter, toward their future, toward all the ordinary, extraordinary moments that would make up their lives. And above them, the stars came out one by one, bearing witness to a family built not from perfection, but from honesty, courage, and the simple revolutionary act of choosing to be happy. The end.